Hey truckers, today we're seeing part 13 of I Have a City in an Alternate World. Let's dive into the video. Stone waved a small knife and scraped off the scales of a big fish in his hand. Then, he took out the internal organs and threw them into the bucket. It was said that these organs would become food for the ogres, so they couldn't be wasted. After smearing the fish meat with coarse salt, Shirtioyu placed it in a big basket at the side. Soon, someone carried it away. The fish meat would be dried and stored in the cave. After processing a batch of fresh fish, Stone wiped the sweat on his forehead and turned to look at the side. Many of the survivors of Black Rock City, like him, were buried in their work, dissecting and processing countless fish and shrimp. With this food, we don't have to worry about hunger anymore, right? As Shirtioyu thought of this, he felt an inexplicable sense of happiness in his heart. They were not residents of Holy Dragon City yet, but the city lord had already promised that as long as they performed well, they could obtain the qualifications of reserve residents. Although he was once a resident of Black Rock City, Stone did not feel very happy. Instead, he felt a slight sense of depression. In a place like Black Rock City, all the good things were controlled by the rich and powerful. The ordinary citizens could only barely fill their stomachs and work day after day, living like the walking dead. There, you would never feel any hope, only confusion and loss. Stone didn't know why the wanderers outside envied the residents of Luqing. Was it because they didn't have to worry about starving to death? During the period when Black Rock City was besieged by the undead, Stone saw many acquaintances disappear from his life. Some of them had died in battle, while others had starved to death. The food exchanged on the Cornerstone trading platform was controlled by the rich and powerful, and would not be distributed to the hungry citizens of Black Rock City. When Stone was on the verge of starving to death, Black Rock City was burned down. He struggled to escape with his remaining physical strength and was later captured by the allied forces of the three cities. Looking at the Black Rock City that had been burned to the ground, Stone did not feel any sadness, because that place only had painful memories. Just as Stone thought that he was about to wander in the wilderness or be killed by the allied forces of the three cities, the convoy of Holy Dragon City appeared and rescued them. The Holy Dragon City's fully armed soldiers, the spectacular convoy, and the incomparably powerful city lord all made Stone feel like he couldn't resist. After witnessing the death of the city lords of the Three Towers and the powerlessness of those who resisted, Stone knew the final outcome. This was a powerful enemy. The Four Towers, including Black Rock City, were no match for him. A bowl of porridge from the Holy Dragon City had saved Shirtioyu's life, giving him a chance to live again. This also made Shirtioyu extremely grateful to the Holy Dragon City. After a long journey, Shirtioyu finally arrived at Holy Dragon City. Looking at the Holy Dragon City's tall city walls and the heavenly scenery inside the city walls, Stone suddenly had an impulse. How good would it be if he became a resident of the Holy Dragon City? After entering the Holy Dragon City, the days were busy but simple. He was busy from morning to night, but Stone felt particularly fulfilled. Here, one didn't have to worry about going hungry, and there was no bullying from the rich and powerful. One could also see many things that they had never seen before. Every day, after Stone finished his work, he would go outside to see the mother tree under the night sky. The guards would never stop him. After a while, Stone became familiar with the guards. From their mouths, Stone learned more about Holy Dragon City. The Holy Dragon City's city lord was very powerful and had an extremely mystical ability. It was said that he could move a small mountain in an instant. The Holy Dragon City's weapons were very powerful. The Holy Dragon City had killed more than 200 of the four-legged flying dragons that were imprisoned in the valley. Their blood had dyed the city walls dark red. The Holy Dragon City's benefits were very good. Not only could they eat their fill and wear warm clothes, but they also gave out many free items, all of which were brand new. Ups.at from n0/v/lbn/dot co/m. The more he knew about the Holy Dragon City, the more Stone desired to become a resident of the Holy Dragon City. Just as Stone was letting his thoughts run wild, a Holy Dragon City soldier walked over. He held a tube that could produce a very loud voice and began to speak from a high place. Attention all citizens of Black Rock City. The governor is going to form a new army and will be selecting soldiers from all the citizens of Black Rock City. As long as they were successfully selected, they could obtain the qualifications of a reserve resident of Holy Dragon City. If they performed well, they would be directly promoted to an official resident. Their family members could also obtain the qualifications of an official resident. Those who want to participate in the selection, report to me and take the test tomorrow. Listening to the Holy Dragon City warrior's explanation, Stone's eyes grew brighter and brighter. When the queue for registration was announced, he was the first to rush forward. Early the next morning, Shirtioyu and a large group of people walked to the back valley and began the selection test. The one in charge of the selection was the Holy Dragon City's army's chief. It was said that his name was Tai Seng, and he was a very powerful cultivator. After nearly half a morning, Stone was so tired that he could barely stand up. Finally, he passed the test. From now on, Stone had obtained the qualification of a reserve resident. After the next upgrade, he would become an official resident of the tower. There were a total of 500 people who had passed the test, and they were led by Tai Seng to a cave. Under the command of a beautiful woman, Shirtioyu and the others carried out many weapons and armors from the cave, as well as new clothes and shoes. Stone looked at the beautiful woman and felt his heart beat fast, but he didn't dare to let his thoughts run wild. I heard that this beautiful woman is called Morongxian, and she's the city lord's woman. Several times, she was seen walking into the city lord's room in the middle of the night, and only walked out of the room with a tired expression after dawn. Stone felt that this was a very normal thing, because this woman was in charge of all the supplies in Holy Dragon City. It was a matter of great importance, so the city lord naturally had to hand it over to the people closest to him. The city lord's woman was naturally someone close to her. After throwing away the random thoughts in his mind, Stone turned to look at the weapons and equipment he had been given. There was a steel sword, a strange-looking dagger, a set of armor, clothes, and shoes. They were all brand new things that could be changed from the inside out. Even the most elite warriors in Black Rock City can't get such equipment. Holy Dragon City is indeed rich. Stone was a little disappointed that he didn't get the automatic rifle, but he knew that it couldn't be given out casually. This was an extremely powerful weapon. Not only was its destructive power shocking, but it was also extremely expensive. It was said to be worth thousands of brain beads. When Shirtioyu first heard the price, he was immediately shocked. When he looked at the guns again, it was as if he was looking at a pile of shiny brain beads. Putting on his clothes and armor, and hanging his weapon on his waist, Stone felt that he had never been so majestic before. He kept his chest out and his head up as he walked. Looking at the envious gazes of the Black Rock City survivors around him, Stone felt extremely proud. Because from today on, he had also become a member of the Holy Dragon City. Tangjin hummed a little tune as he walked on the road. Behind him, Morongxian and dozens of people were slowly walking out of the Holy Dragon City. From time to time, the Holy Dragon City's residents would bow to Tangjin, their faces filled with respect. Looking at Tangjin, who had a satisfied expression and was wearing a set of loose clothing, the residents felt a little strange. Why was the city lord so leisurely today? Looking at the group of people behind him, all of them were important figures in Holy Dragon City, as well as their respective families. Looking at their clothes, they seemed to be going out of the city to play, right? When the Holy Dragon City's residents saw Tangjin, he would usually be in a hurry, often so busy that his feet would not even touch the ground, wishing that he had a clone to help. This was the first time he had put down his work to go out and play. Perhaps the city lord was tired, so he decided to take a rest. When the residents thought of this, they sincerely hoped that the city lord would rest for 2 more days and not be too tired. Tangjin indeed didn't have any urgent work today. Therefore, he chose to rest for a day. Everything that needed to be done in the Holy Dragon City had been arranged properly. Tangjin only needed to find time to patrol. Tangjin's hands were also a little itchy after seeing the bustling fishing scene a few days ago. He planned to play for a while. Unlike the fishermen who were purely fishing, Tangjin just wanted to take the opportunity to rest and have a barbecue. It just so happened that the new residents needed to be communicated with, so Tangjin simply called all the Holy Dragon City's higher-ups to go to the river to relax. The pickup truck that followed behind them had a large pile of barbecue supplies. After arriving at the riverside, Tangjin and the rest found a quiet and clean place and began to get busy. Tangjin did not intend to use a fishing rod to fish. Instead, he took out a bow and arrow from his space and began to aim at the fish in the water. The Emo Battle bow he was using had a special line wheel attached to it. A high-strength fishing line was connected to the arrow to ensure that it could be quickly retracted after being shot. Simply put, this was a bow that had been modified by Tangjin and was specially used to shoot fish. In addition, there were more than 20 ordinary bows and arrows in the pickup truck, which were also fixed with special release wheels. Tai Sing, Qianlong, and the others didn't need to be called out as they all put on their polarized glasses and ran to the riverbank to shoot fish. Tangjin stood alone on the shore and slowly pulled the demon bow in his hand. With the activation of the application, the river water was immediately blocked and filtered. Tangjin began to scan the river in front of him and chose the fish and shrimp that were suitable for eating. Previously, when Arel was distinguishing the edible fish with his clansmen, Tangjin was watching from the side and remembered a few of the delicious fish and shrimp. Tangjin had once tasted these fish and prawns. That kind of fresh and delicious taste almost made him bite off his tongue. It was still fresh in his memory. What Tangjin needed to do now was to search for those few types of fish in the river and have a good meal. However, according to Arel, those fish were rare even in the Starfall Sea. They were sold at high prices, and ordinary people would not be willing to eat them. Tangjin secretly prayed in his heart. He hoped that his luck would be better and he would be able to catch a few to satisfy his craving. In the field of vision, he could see everything in the river, including countless fish. What Tangjin had to do was to search for the target he wanted to catch among the large and small fish and shrimp. For some unknown reason, the Magic-Eye Tyrannosaurus drove away countless water monsters, as well as countless ordinary fish and shrimp, to the hole in the sky. Perhaps the Demon-Eye Tyrannosaurus wants to rely on these water monsters to achieve some kind of goal. These ordinary fish and shrimp are just food for the water monsters? Tangjin had a faint guess in his heart, but he did not dare to confirm it. However, the Demon-Eye Tyrannosaurus could never have imagined that the water monsters, fish, and shrimp it had used to carry out its plan had now become the Holy Dragon City's food reserves. Tangjin might be the nemesis of these people. Whether it was the Spirit Brain Corpse King or the Demon-Eye Tyrannosaurus, Tangjin had once destroyed their plans, intentionally or unintentionally. Tangjin had never dared to take the Demon-Eye Tyrannosaurus lightly. According to Tangjin's guess, when a monster reached the King tier, it would mean that it had entered a new height of life. Its intelligence would also be greatly improved. The Magic-Eye Tyrannosaurus actions were very strange. There must be a deeper meaning behind this. It was just that his information channels were limited, so he was temporarily unable to figure out its true purpose. It seems that I have to keep a close eye on these water monsters' movements in the future. Tangjin's eyes suddenly focused when he thought of this. the bow and arrow in his hand suddenly shot out. The sharp arrow shot into the water like a bolt of lightning and went straight to the bottom of the river, which was more than 10 meters deep. Demon weapons had extremely powerful attributes. The demon battle bow in Tangjin's hand was the same. Apart from special underwater firearms, it was very difficult for ordinary weapons to penetrate the river water that was more than 10 meters deep and hit a swimming fish. However, Tangjin's demon weapon battle bow could do this. This was why he used this weapon. In the clear salty river, a foot-long fat fish with a translucent body was slowly swimming, not aware of the approaching danger. Pfft! A sharp arrow suddenly fell from the sky and pierced through the fat fish's body. Haha, we hit the target! Due to the use of the water shield, Tangjin completely did not need to consider the problem of refraction and directly hit the translucent fat fish. He quickly retracted the fishing line wheel. The fat fish that was struggling on the brink of death quickly left the water surface and fell into Tangjin's hands. Explore Ta-Ti stories at no/l/bin.cm. Xian, try this fish. Tangjin removed the sharp arrow and took a military knife from the folding table at the side. He quickly broke it down into countless pieces of thin skin. Tangjin picked up a thin piece of fish and brought it to Murong Xian's mouth. Murong Xian gently opened her small mouth and put the fish slice in Tangjin's hand into her mouth. At the same time, she also sucked on Tangjin's finger without leaving a trace. Her charming eyes were like silk, and the affection in her eyes was unconcealed. However, she was soon attracted by the deliciousness of the fish and praised, "The fish melted in my mouth. It's so delicious." Hearing this, Qianlong immediately came over and placed a piece of fish into his mouth before giving him a thumbs up. Haha, I also shot one. Not far away by the river, Tai Sing, who was wearing a pair of polarized glasses, was constantly retracting his fishing line as he shouted. Looking at the tension of the line in the water, it was obviously a big fish. It didn't take long before a big, round fish was pulled out of the water by Tai Sing, still struggling non-stop. Tai Sing flicked his finger lightly at the fish's head, and the fish was immediately killed, being carried in Tai Sing's hand. Arel walked in front of Tyson and looked at the 1-meter-long fish. This fish tastes good, but it's not as delicious as the one that City Lord shot. Because of Arel's strange accent, it took Tyson several times to understand the meaning of his words. It's fine, as long as it can be eaten. Let's go! Tyson waved his hand heroically and passed the big fish in his hand to Xiao Rui, who was beside him, and then continued to search for other fish in the water. Mr. Moran was fiddling with the barbecue rack, turning pieces of roasted meat over and over. Soon, a fragrant aroma filled the air. When he was young, he had roamed the wilderness and had barbecued food in the wild countless times, but that was only to fill his stomach. It was the first time he had come into contact with a barbecue method like today, which had all the ingredients and tools, so he was very excited. The little ones ran over from time to time and secretly took a skewer of roasted meat. Moran never stopped them, but just watched them silently with a smile on his face. Such a pleasant life was his lifelong pursuit. After shooting a few rare fat fish, Tangjin passed the bow to a strong man beside him. This person was one of the wanderers that Tangjin had rescued from the insect thieves' lair. He had already obtained an important position in the Holy Dragon City's army with his own abilities. Stepping on the fine gravel, Tangjin walked to Moran's side, picked up a skewer of roasted meat, and tasted it. Your cooking skills are not bad. The roasted meat is delicious. Tangjin gave Moran a thumbs up and praised him. Moran smiled. He picked up the teacup beside him and took a sip before saying to Tangjin, I don't deserve it. It's mainly because of the complete set of ingredients. Tangjin picked up another meat skewer, but he did not immediately eat it. Instead, he said to Moran, from tomorrow onwards, all the children in Holy Dragon City who meet the standards will begin to receive your guidance. Thank you for your concern, sir. Mo Ran's expression turned serious when he heard this. He said to Tang Jin, "This is my job. There's no need to worry about it." "City Lord, you're too polite." Tang Jin shook his head. He looked at the children playing by the river and softly laughed. "Mr. Maruin is very experienced and has taught many disciples. I believe you understand the importance of cultivating reserve cultivators better than I do." From the looks of it, the Holy Dragon City's forces were strong and no one nearby could defeat them, but what would happen if they walked out of this area? Holy Dragon City was different from Black Rock City. They would not be content with staying in a corner. The most likely method to use was to expand their military power. I even dare to say that when Lucheng develops to a certain extent, the soldiers of the main battle legion may be replaced by cultivators, and the ordinary soldiers of Lucheng will gradually be eliminated. After he said this, Tang Jin looked at Mo Ran without turning his eyes and said in a very serious tone, "Mr. Moran, you may not have realized how important your duty is. It might take a year, or 3 years. In short, Holy Dragon City would welcome a large number of new residents. After these residents arrive, many of them will become your disciples and receive the most basic cultivation skills training. Thus, you have a huge responsibility on your shoulders, so you must be mentally prepared." Mo Ran listened carefully and asked casually, "What is the large number of residents that the city lord mentioned? 10,000 or more?" Tang Jin smiled and shook his head. He extended a finger. Mo Ran's expression became a little solemn as he slightly bowed to Tang Jin. "Please tell me the exact number of people, City Lord. This way, I can be prepared." Tang Jin hesitated for a moment before giving a conservative number, 1 million. Mo Ran was shocked when he heard this. If these words were not said by Tang Jin, he would definitely think that the other party was spouting nonsense. 1 million cultivators was a terrifying number. Not to mention the resources required to train these cultivators, just the 1 million students with the talent to become cultivators alone could only be selected from hundreds of millions of humans. A talent ratio of 1% was not something to be said casually. However, when he looked around, Mo Ran couldn't even find a place with hundreds of millions of humans. The place with the most humans he had ever seen only had about 100,000 people. Even the human race's buildings that had been passed down for 10,000 years only had 10 million residents and 100,000 cultivators at most. Where did the 1 million cultivators that the city lord spoke of come from? Mo Ran was filled with doubts. Unfortunately, Tang Jin didn't tell him more information and only told him to be mentally prepared. After a while, everyone gathered around. All kinds of drinks were moved to the table, and the fragrant barbecue was also placed on the table. With wine and food in hand, everyone was in high spirits and kept exchanging cups. Tang Jin was holding a cup of wine and a delicious grilled fish in his hand. His face was filled with enjoyment as he savored the fragrance of the food. After Tai Seng and Qian Long had a drinking contest, he walked over with a red face. From his expression, he must have gotten Qian Long drunk again. In this aspect, Qian Long had never won. Picking up a grilled fish skewer, the two of them sat on the chairs by the river. Tai Seng looked at Tang Jin and said, "City Lord, the army is ready. We can start tomorrow." When Tai Seng said these words, there was not a trace of drunkenness on his face, and he appeared to be unusually serious. Tang Jin expressionlessly drank a mouthful of wine before turning to look at Tai Seng. "Remember what I said. Holy Dragon City doesn't need citizens who have second thoughts. When you lead your troops to take over the resources of the 4 towers, you will act according to this standard." Tai Seng nodded his head, but his eyes were cold. As the Holy Dragon City's population grew rapidly, the difficulty of management also gradually increased. Those who had disloyal thoughts had to be cleared out at the first opportunity. A 1,000-mile dam could be destroyed by an ant's nest. In the face of such a matter of life and death, one must be ruthless. After taking over all 4 towers, Tang Jin was prepared to take some time to digest it and upgrade Holy Dragon City to level 3. At that time, they would be able to show the true strength of the Holy Dragon City to all the races in the wilderness. The next morning, more than a dozen Wasteland war chariots were parked side by side in the Holy Dragon City's square. The survivors of Black Rock City who passed by pointed and discussed. The captives had complicated expressions on their faces. They all knew the meaning of the Wasteland war chariots leaving the cave. This was a war machine. Once it appeared, it meant that the Holy Dragon City's war blade had once again been unsheathed. He did not need to think too much to guess that the Holy Dragon City was going to send out warriors to take over the wealth and resources of the defeated cities. I hope that they will show mercy and accept the residents of this city as well. Then, we can reunite with our families. Many of the captives were praying in their hearts. After all, their families were their only concern. Orders were continuously passed down. Other than the Holy Dragon City's Legion warriors, the newly established Holy Dragon City's 2nd Legion had also finished assembling. They would act as auxiliary troops and participate in the operation together with the Holy Dragon City's main battle legion. With Tai Sang's command, the convoy slowly drove out of Holy Dragon City, heading straight for Colossal Bone City and 100 Flower Valley. As for the other 2 towers, they would have to see if the river blocked their path before making a decision. Tang Jin looked at the Holy Dragon City's army through the map's view. Only then did he turn his gaze back to the map in front of him. And NBSP, Tai Sang's operation this time would take about 3 days. During this period, he would keep in contact with the Holy Dragon City and could request for military helicopter support at any time. Based on the speed of the assault helicopter, it would reach the target in less than an hour. With such a method, Tang Jin could guarantee absolute control of the 100-kilometer area, leaving no place for the monsters and the raider group to hide. This was also one of the things that Tang Jin wanted to do. It was to completely clean up the area within 100 kilometers and turn this place into a pure land. The reason why Tang Jin wanted to do this was to provide security for the supermarket he was going to build and the business groups that came to trade. According to Tang Jin's plan, after Liu Qing was upgraded to level 3, the supermarket in Holy Dragon City would also officially open. A week later, in a certain area of the Holy Dragon City, there was currently a huge construction going on. The construction site was bustling with people, busy figures everywhere, and cars would roar past from time to time. This was a newly added piece of land that was originally part of the gravel plain. Tang Jin once again used the Map Transformation plugin and circled a large area of land into the Sacred Dragon Valley. There were 3 areas in Holy Dragon City at the moment. They were the original location of the valley where the main and auxiliary cities were located, the back valley that was used for planting, and the newly added commercial area. This construction site was the commercial district that the Holy Dragon City was currently building. It was separated from the residential district and belonged to a different area. When this place opened for business, all business groups that came to the Holy Dragon City to trade would enter this area to purchase all kinds of goods sold in the Holy Dragon City. Goods from other places would also be traded here. In order to build this commercial area, Tang Jin had invested a large number of brain pearls and resources. Just the number of brain pearls consumed by the terrain transformation alone was over 300,000. Fortunately, after the last attack on the corpse race, Tang Jin's pocket became more and more full, and he could completely cope with this kind of consumption. It was because of these efforts that the commercial area was built to be magnificent. One would be deeply shocked at a glance. The power of cell phone applications was once again displayed perfectly. The wide and flat streets, the tall houses transformed from rocks, and the dense caves in the rock walls were all prepared for this commercial district. Thousands of Black Rock City survivors were using all sorts of tools to make the place even more perfect and neat. Tang Jin walked on the rocky road that was built using the Terrain Transformation plugin with his hands behind his back. He would occasionally look at the buildings on both sides of the road. Because of the deliberate adjustment, the buildings in the commercial district were extremely tall. The huge square in the central area was not inferior to the Holy Dragon City Square. As the main buildings were made of rock, the style was very rough, and the corners were not smooth. Such a building would give people an uncomfortable feeling. The survivors of Black Rock City divided the work and worked together. They used tools such as hammers and metal drills to deal with the rough areas, making them look more beautiful. Some places were even decorated with paint and cement to make it look neater and more beautiful. Originally, from the map perspective, the entire commercial district was filled with the aura of wasteland. This was the place that Tang Jin was most dissatisfied with. In addition to being majestic, his own commercial district also needed to be beautiful and prosperous. However, the monotonous khaki color clearly could not meet Tang Jin's requirements. In order to erase the monotonous yellow color, Tang Jin moved all the trees in a park on the Wei Island in one breath and then transplanted them to every corner of the commercial district. These transported trees were all decades old. Every year when they bloomed, they would attract a large number of tourists. Tang Jin's action of completely removing all these trees this time immediately caused a huge uproar. The media also reported it without restraint. However, no matter how they investigated, they could not confirm who had dug up these trees. In the end, the matter was left unsettled. Perhaps it was due to the mutation or the influence of the mother tree's ability, but the trees from the original world survived quickly after being transplanted and showed a different life force. In less than 2 days after the transplantation, the branches of these trees were actually covered with flower buds, and after another night, they all bloomed. In just a few days, the business district had turned into a sea of flowers. Tang Jin saw this and was amazed. He bought a large number of green seedlings and planted them in all corners of the commercial district. A canal leading to Pearl Lake was also led by Tang Jin to provide daily water for the commercial district to nourish the flowers and trees. With the existence of these trees and green grass, the business district was no longer monotonous and appeared to be full of vitality. According to the plan on the map, the business district contained many business places, such as auction houses, restaurants, hotels, and so on. When the time came, these places would be managed by the residents of Holy Dragon City, earning a large number of brain pearls for Holy Dragon City. In the Holy Dragon City's warehouse, there were a lot of resources stored. Many of them were things that Tang Jin did not need. When the time came, they could all be used to trade. Many strange items could also be sent to the auction house to be sold, and other merchant groups could also send them to the auction house. There were also restaurants and inns that could let the aboriginals of the World of Towers enjoy a different kind of enjoyment. Only when the customers were satisfied would they pay for it, and Tang Jin would have a large sum of money to earn. The publicity work for the business district had already begun. Tang Jin had spent a large number of points on the Cornerstone trading platform to let many forces in the city know of the existence of the Holy Dragon City's business district. Many buyers who were trading with Tang Jin on the Cornerstone trading platform helplessly expressed that they would send caravans to purchase after Tang Jin announced the change in the trading method. Although it was convenient to trade on the Cornerstone trading platform as an exclusive supplier, Tang Jin had the right to choose the trading method. These buyers could not do anything to him. This was the advantage of a monopoly. One could easily set all kinds of rules that benefited one. These days, Qianlong had been flying a military helicopter to a place 100 miles away to throw out flyers, and then left under the horrified gazes of the Wanderers and Liu Chang's forces. Through these flyers and attack helicopters, these buildings had the most basic understanding of Holy Dragon City. It was only at this moment that they realized that a human city called Holy Dragon City had appeared 100 miles away. Although it was only rank 2, it had conquered 5 towers in a row, including Black Rock City and Colossal Bone City. What kind of terrifying strength was this? When people first heard it, they would think that he was joking. However, after seeing the assault helicopters and hearing the rumors, the various forces in the wilderness had no choice but to believe it. This holy dragon city indeed possessed terrifying strength, and at the same time, it had incomparably rich resources. A strong sense of crisis hit them, making the leaders of the forces who had received the flyers feel as if they were sitting on pins and needles. They were afraid that the Holy Dragon City would point their troops at them. According to the information they had obtained, the Holy Dragon City had the power to easily destroy a city tower. How could they not be afraid? However, it was useless to be afraid of such things. At most, they could take precautions in advance and form alliances to strengthen their own cards. Looking at the introduction of the Holy Dragon City's business district on the flyers, as well as the dazzling array of various products, the leaders of these forces were all greatly shocked. Should he send a caravan to the Holy Dragon City's commercial district to trade? The leaders of many forces fell into deep thought. Get your Avrite Ovals at no/v/e/lbn.com. In the Holy Dragon City's business district, Tangjin stood on top of a stone tower that reached the clouds as he carefully observed the scenery beneath his feet. It was one of the highest points in the central area of the commercial district, which could be used to monitor the entire commercial district. When the business district opened for business, this place would be the alert point of the business district. The cultivators stationed in the Holy Dragon City would hold guns and be on guard. At critical moments, they could directly kill the rioters. Tangjin had also left a path on the surrounding cliffs that reached the clouds. He had stationed soldiers from the Holy Dragon City to guard it. With these forces as a deterrent, it could ensure that the trading groups would not dare to act rashly. Apart from this, Tangjin would also send Holy Dragon City's soldiers to patrol the area and deal with any disputes. This was Tangjin's territory. Anyone who didn't follow the rules would be punished accordingly. Tai Sing had already returned to Holy Dragon City 2 days ago, bringing back large amounts of resources and brains. During this period of time, the Luqing warriors returned to the Holy Dragon City one after another, bringing back a large number of Luqing survivors. There were thousands of them. After hearing Tai Sing's report, Tangjin finally understood the entire process. The Holy Dragon City's army first arrived at 100 Flower Valley's Tower City. According to their previous agreement, they would unconditionally submit to the Holy Dragon City. However, for safety reasons, Tai Sing ordered all the soldiers to be prepared for battle before they got close to the Tower of 100 Flower Valley. Once the 100 Flower Valley Tower showed any signs of abnormality, the Holy Dragon City's warriors would not hesitate to attack and raze that place to the ground. However, when Tai Sing saw the 100 Flower Valley residents who had already packed up their bags and had faces full of anticipation, he knew that this battle was not going to happen. A cultivator from Centauria Valley walked up and bowed respectfully to Tai Sing before handing him a letter. Respected leader Tai Sing, this is a letter that our city lord has ordered me to pass to you. Please pass it to the Holy Dragon City Lord. Tai Sing held the sealed letter and asked in confusion, "Where is your city lord? Why doesn't she come out personally?" The city lord has already left this place 2 days ago and returned to his hometown. Before she left, she told us that we must treat Holy Dragon City as our new home and not have any other thoughts. Holy Dragon City is more powerful than Centauria Valley. We will definitely have a better life there. Is that so? She left in a carefree manner. Tai Sing's mouth twitched as he looked at the crowd of 100 Flower Valley residents and said helplessly, "So you've finished organizing the supplies in Luqing?" Hearing this, the cultivator took out another account book. "This is the list of all the supplies. Please check and accept it." "What's the point of me checking? It's all up to you guys." F***CK. Tai Sing cursed, feeling depressed that he couldn't plunder everything. Before Tangjin came, he had given an order that the residents who were sincerely submitting must be appeased. He did not dare to check the luggage of these residents. Shoving the bill into his pocket, Tyson pointed at the track behind him and said, "Do you see this route? You can walk there on your own. I'll send someone to pick you up on the way. You'll probably reach Holy Dragon City before the sun sets." After Tai Sing gave a few more instructions, he ignored the embarrassed 100 Flower Valley cultivators and jumped onto the war chariot. "Let's go. We're heading to Colossal Bone City." Under the reverent gazes of the 100 Flower Valley's residents, the fleet of carriages left a trail of dust behind them as they headed toward the depths of the wilderness. After another 3 hours or so, a city tower built on a huge skeleton appeared in front of everyone. It was said that the skeleton had a history of 10,000 years and had not decayed even after being exposed to wind and rain. It was the remains of an extremely terrifying super monster. Even now, the giant skeleton still exuded a faint aura of power, causing some low-level monsters to not dare to approach the remains. The appearance of the city was very unique. It seemed to be made of countless white bones, and the skulls of some high-level monsters were hung on the city walls to show off the military power of the city. Holy Dragon City's wasteland war chariots slowly came to a stop about half a kilometer away from Colossal Bone City. And NBSP, Tai Sing used his military binoculars to survey Colossal Bone City, and a sinister smile appeared on his face. Damn it, this Colossal Bone City really doesn't know how to appreciate favors. They've actually set up ballistae, and are going to fight to the death. But that's good too. If I don't see some blood, they won't know how powerful I am. After saying that, Tyson immediately jumped into the military jeep and started to roar. "People of Colossal Bone City, listen up. I am Tai Sing, the commander of the Holy Dragon City's army. I am here to receive all the resources and residents of the city. Your city lord has been killed. The warriors and cultivators are all in the Holy Dragon City. As long as you come out obediently, I'll let your family reunite. If you dare to resist, I will immediately attack the city. When the city is broken through, leave no one alive." As soon as Tai Sing said that, a pitch-black crossbow bolt whistled through the air and suddenly shot out from the city, landing on the ground a dozen meters in front of him. This arrow was obviously shot from a ballista, and it was very powerful. After it landed on the ground, it pierced more than half a meter deep into the soil, and the end of the arrow kept shaking. If it landed on a human body, it would probably be cut into two immediately. And NBSP, seeing this, Tai Sing laughed instead of getting angry as he turned around and called out, "Brothers, get ready to work." Following Tai Sing's order, the super light howitzer was moved down and they started to make preparations for the bombardment. On the colossal bone building not far away, a gloomy-looking young man was fully armed. He was constantly sizing up the Holy Dragon City's convoy. This young man was the son of the city lord of Colossal Bone City. When he had heard about what had happened from the soldiers of Colossal Bone City that Tangjin had released, he had immediately jumped up to avenge his father. At the same time, he had also locked up the few elders who had advocated for peace. Although Colossal Bone City had suffered heavy losses this time around, with most of its armed forces being suppressed by Tangjin, there were still some fighting forces left in the city. The young master of Colossal Bone City believed that with his own methods and the sturdiness of the city, even if the Holy Dragon City came to attack, they would definitely be defeated. As for the flintlocks and cannons, although the young master of Colossal Bone City was wary of them, he did not take them too seriously, as the city was very sturdy. In the few days before the Holy Dragon army arrived, the young lord of Colossal Bone City had been preparing his troops for battle. He had vowed to let the Holy Dragon army's Lucheng soldiers have a taste of the might of Colossal Bone City's soldiers. When Tai Sing had shouted earlier, the young master of Colossal Bone City was looking at the Holy Dragon City's abandoned earth war chariot with bright eyes. At the same time, he had ordered his men to teach Taising a lesson. Seeing how the Holy Dragon City's soldiers became busy after Taising stopped shouting, everyone knew that they were preparing to attack the city. One of the cultivators from Colossal Bone City stepped forward and could not help but ask, "Young master, I see that Holy Dragon City is approaching menacingly. I'm afraid it won't be easy to deal with them. Why don't we, Wufu?" "Shut up!" The young master of Colossal Bone City bellowed and slapped the cultivator to the side. He cursed, "Holy Dragon City is just a second-grade city. They only managed to get away with it by relying on the advantage of the flintlock. If we were to engage in a direct battle, our Colossal Bone City would be able to kill them 10 to 100 times. This is the advantage of a level 3 city against a level 2 city." Although the difference in levels wasn't obvious, it was real. Did you think that the increase in attributes of the residents in the city was just empty talk? Do you really think that the Holy Dragon City will follow the agreement and let you continue to be residents of the city after taking over all the supplies and residents, and not start a massacre? If you say another word of nonsense to disrupt the morale of the army, I will kill you immediately. After the young master of Colossal Bone City finished his sentence, he turned to look at the Holy Dragon Army in the distance and said in a deep voice, "I know you're worried that your families will be affected after the city is broken. I've already made arrangements for this matter. All the warriors and cultivators who participated in the battle, I've gathered your family and hid them in a safe place. If Colossal Bone City fails, they will be sent to a tower 100 miles away. The city lord there is my uncle, and he will take care of your family. As for the remaining residents of the city, they can only leave it to fate." The cultivator nodded in acknowledgement at the young master's words, but he felt a chill run down his spine. For the sake of his own will, he had dragged countless ordinary citizens along with him. What a sinister act this was. Even a fool could tell how powerful Holy Dragon City was. However, the young master of Colossal Bone City had chosen not to cooperate in order to protect his power and wealth. Once Colossal Bone City was defeated, would Holy Dragon City easily let off the citizens of the city tower who had once resisted them? Even though the young master of Colossal Bone City had arranged families for the participants, the price was to pay with their lives. Besides, was it really good to live under someone else's roof? Top VL updates on n/o/v/lb/in.com. He said that he had arranged for the families of the participants, but wasn't this also a kind of kidnapping and threat, forcing them to fight to the death? Why didn't they accept the Holy Dragon City's conditions? They had promised not to rob the wealth of ordinary residents and to give them the qualifications of reserve residents. At that thought, the cultivator's eyes were filled with complicated emotions. He looked at the young master of Giant Bone City with a hint of hatred. When no one was paying attention, he quietly retreated and slipped out of the city without anyone noticing. Tyson lowered his head and checked the shell. Then he turned to the machine gunner on the wasteland tank and started to roar. "Rich Captain, you better save some bullets for me later. If you dare to pull the trigger again, I'll make you a cookhouse soldier." "I don't know how to cook, so why would I be a cookhouse soldier?" Hearing this, the team leader's ugly face immediately drooped, and he mumbled in dissatisfaction. "Damn it!" Taising pointed at the air a few times and cursed before turning to look in the direction of Colossal Bone City. The eyesight of cultivators was very good, and Taising didn't need to use a telescope to clearly see the scenery outside the building's window. When Taising saw the face of the young master of Colossal Bone City that was asking for a beating, he really wanted to punch out his front teeth. "Don't cry when the cannon is fired." "What's going on?" Tyson asked and confirmed that the light howitzer could start firing in a minute. With the power of the super light howitzer, it would only take a few shots to blow up Colossal Bone City. At this moment, a figure rushed towards the Holy Dragon City's convoy, looking very panicked. The warriors of the Holy Dragon City's Second Legion were in charge of keeping watch. When they saw the figure running towards the convoy, they immediately drew their battle swords and blocked it. "I want to see your leader. I have important information to report." The man dressed as a cultivator from Colossal Bone City shouted and tried to break through the blockade. However, he did not dare to be too presumptuous under the lock-on of a few rifles. "What's going on? Why are you making so much noise?" Tai Sing walked over and looked at the giant Bone City cultivator as he said coldly, "Who are you? Are you here to surrender?" The cultivator shook his head and said to Tessin, the young master of Colossal Bone City had no intention of surrendering. He kidnapped the families of all the soldiers and forced them to fight to the death. It would be fine if they succeeded, but if they failed, the families of these soldiers would not be able to escape death. I've already received reliable information that once the young master of Colossal Bone City fails to defend the city, he will retreat through a secret passage and meet up with his trusted aides. All of the wealth of Colossal Bone City was in the hands of these people, and not a single brain could be found in the city. According to the young master of Colossal Bone City's personality, he would definitely not bring a bunch of burdens with him, as that would slow down his escape and make it easier for him to be exposed. The best way is to silence him. After saying that, the giant Bone City cultivator looked at Tai Sing and pleaded, "Please, please, please stop him from doing this and save the families of those soldiers." Tai Sing's brows furrowed slightly. Originally, he had some respect for this young master of Colossal Bone City who refused to surrender, but from the looks of it now, he was just a scheming fellow. He was planning to defend if he won, and retreat if he lost. Thinking up to this point, Tai Sing sneered. There were so many good things in the world, and all of them developed according to his wishes. Waving his hand to summon a Holy Dragon City cultivator, Tai Sing whispered an order into his ear and turned to leave. The Holy Dragon City cultivator walked over and asked the giant Bone City cultivator a few more questions, before taking him to a pickup truck and driving toward the back of the city. A wasteland war chariot and troop carrier followed closely behind, pulling dozens of Holy Dragon City soldiers. At the same time, Tai Sing gave the order and the super light howitzer started to roar. Boom! A cannonball whizzed out and hit the window of the mounted crossbow in Colossal Bone City. A few of the warriors of Colossal Bone City who had peeked their heads out saw a flash of fire, and then they heard a loud boom. The huge shockwave had turned the entire room into ruins. A single cannonball had killed more than 10 warriors of the city, blasting a huge hole in the walls of the city. The young master of Colossal Bone City, who was on the other side of the wall, was so frightened by the explosion that his face turned pale, and his legs began to tremble. The sound of a cannon rang out, and everyone trembled in fear. At this very moment, he finally understood the Holy Dragon City's terrifying power. He had completely abandoned all his little schemes. The Holy Dragon City's cannons are so powerful. There's no way that Colossal Bone City can resist them. I need to retreat quickly. The young master of Colossal Bone City had just thought of this when he heard another whistling sound. It was the sound of cannonballs striking again. The young master of Colossal Bone City was so frightened that his legs turned to jelly and he rolled down the stairs. And it was this roll that had saved the young master's life. After the cannonball exploded, the house next to it completely collapsed. The guards who had been standing beside him were all killed by the shockwave of the explosion. Their clothes were torn and they were bleeding from their 7 orifices. A guard's corpse happened to fall not far from the young master of Colossal Bone City. Looking at the guard's tragic death, the young master of Colossal Bone City was completely terrified. Hearing the continuous sounds of cannon fire behind him, the young master of Colossal Bone City stumbled into the secret tunnel of the city and ran with all his might. The Holy Dragon City fired a total of 10 cannonballs and then stopped firing. Although Tangjin had managed to bring back a lot of shells this time, Tyson wanted to save as much as possible and only ordered the artillery to fire 10 shells. Looking at the giant bone tower that was riddled with holes, Tyson nodded his head in satisfaction, thinking that this was enough to intimidate the rest. Jumping into the jeep, Tyson pulled the horn and shouted again, "That young master of Colossal Bone City, are you convinced now? If you're not convinced, I'll give you 10 more cannonballs. Your men risked their lives for you, but you kidnapped their families. You even planned to kill them all and run away. You're really ruthless to treat your own residents like this. Now that you've seen the power of my cannon, do you still think you have a chance of winning?" After Tyson said this, he lowered his head and took a sip of water. He planned to use the psychological attack tactic he learned from the video Tangjin brought. But right at this moment, someone from Colossal Bone City stood up and waved his arm at Tyson, shouting, "The young city lord is not here, he has already run away." "Coward!" After hearing this, Tyson shouted into the radio, "If that's the case, then surrender immediately and I'll spare your lives." The giant Bone City cultivator on the other side turned around and discussed with his companions before shouting at Tyson, "After we surrender, can you promise that you will not punish us as per the agreement, and at the same time, promise that you will not harm the residents of Colossal Bone City?" Cut the F * king crap. I'll do what our city lord said. If you keep talking, I'll fire. Shut up. Tyson angrily roared and then casually threw the megaphone in his hand. He had already made up his mind. If this group of people dawdled any longer, he would command the chariot to directly charge over. What kind of place was the Holy Dragon City? How could it be the turn of this group of people who had lost to them to talk about conditions? Perhaps it was Tyson's declaration that he was going to fire the cannons that scared the warriors of Colossal Bone City. In less than a minute, a group of warriors raised their weapons high and slowly walked towards the Holy Dragon City convoy. Behind these warriors were the residents of Giant Bone City, who were walking out one after another. They were all cowering together, their faces filled with fear. As time passed, more and more residents of Colossal Bone City walked out and gathered in the open space in front of the convoy. When no one else walked out of Giant Bone City, Tyson stood on the abandoned war chariot and began to speak to the residents of the city. "I believe you all know of our city lord's promise, which is not to take away your private property, and to give you the qualifications of reserve residence. This is a good thing that can't be found even with a lantern. It's a good thing that many wanderers dream of, but how did you do it in the end?" He refused to surrender and even used a mounted crossbow to ambush me. "To be honest, I really want to drive you all into the wilderness and let you die on your own. However, our city lord will not allow me to do so, because he loves the people like his children and he is truly working hard for the prosperity of the human race. As long as you sincerely pledge your allegiance to the Holy Dragon City from today onwards, all past mistakes will be forgiven, and everyone will be a resident of the city in the future. If you don't want to come to Holy Dragon City, I won't force you. I'll give you a chance. Please leave immediately." As soon as Tyson said this, he had a ferocious expression on his face as he glared and roared, "Now, tell me, who is planning to leave? Stand out immediately." The tycoon captain's mouth twitched as he mumbled with a cigarette in his mouth, "Only a fool would stand out just from your murderous look. Ingluo, LL new rise at N0V/LBI/.cm. For a full minute, no one responded. Tyson then recovered his smile and laughed, "At least you're tactful. Since that's the case, go back and pack your personal belongings, then immediately head to Holy Dragon City." Some of the residents of Colossal Bone City, who were worried that Holy Dragon City would go back on their word and had originally planned to leave, now secretly wiped their sweat. Fortunately, he didn't stand up, or he would have lost his life. Just as the residents of Colossal Bone City were about to return to the city to pack their bags, the sound of a car engine could be heard. He turned around and saw the young city lord of Colossal Bone City covered in blood, tied to the front of the war chariot. Behind them were a large group of residents of Giant Bone City, all of them looking as if they had just survived a disaster. Upon seeing this, the residents of Colossal Bone City had a flash of fear in their eyes. As the most influential figure in Colossal Bone City, they could not help but doubt Holy Dragon City's promise when the young master of Colossal Bone City was treated in such a way. No matter what kind of person the young master of Colossal Bone City was, they were all on the same side. Was the Holy Dragon City starting to suppress him now? Humph. Tai Sing couldn't help but snort coldly when he saw the wavering gazes of the residents and walked up to the young master of Colossal Bone City. Both of the young master's legs had been broken, and from the looks of the wounds, they had probably been caused by shooting. Come here and explain to them what's going on. Tai Sing called the cultivator from Colossal Bone City who had reported the news earlier over and had him stand on the military jeep before passing the megaphone to him. The Giant Bone City cultivator waved his hand at the residents, then shouted into the megaphone, "Everyone, quiet down and listen to me." Shwa shwa shwa. The voice from the speaker gave everyone a fright, but they quickly quieted down and looked at the Giant Bone City cultivator. You may not know this, but our young city lord has kidnapped the families of all the soldiers and gathered them in the concave land in the back mountain. At the same time, he had also packed up all the wealth of Colossal Bone City and brought it out with him. Then, he made us fight the Holy Dragon City's army to the death, while he abandoned everyone and sneaked away through a secret passage. At this point, the cultivator's eyes turned red. He pointed his arm at the young master of Giant Bone City and roared in pain. In the end, as soon as this bastard got away, he ordered all the soldiers' families to be killed, not a single one. You're simply heartless, worse than a pig or a dog. When the residents of Colossal Bone City heard this, they immediately burst into a commotion. The warriors of the city tower even jumped up, wanting to seek revenge on the young master of Colossal Bone City. The family members of the soldiers of Luqing who had been sitting in the troop carriers also came over. They hugged their husband and son and began to cry. If not for Holy Dragon City's timely arrival, I'm afraid we wouldn't have been able to meet again. Young City Lord, you're so cruel. You and your father risked your life for Luqing, but this is the result. This guy is selfish and doesn't treat the residents as human beings. I think we should kill him directly. Yes, kill him. Kill him. In the beginning, there were only a dozen or so residents of Colossal Bone City who were shouting to kill, but after less than 10 seconds, almost all of them were shouting. They all felt the pain of being betrayed and abandoned, and the culprit was clearly the young master of Colossal Bone City. Seeing this, Tai Sing waved to the soldiers beside him and said, "Drag them to the front and kill them all." When the Holy Dragon City warriors heard this, they immediately untied the young master of Colossal Bone City from the carriage. At the same time, more than 10 Colossal Bone City cultivators, who looked like dead dogs, were dragged to the open space. These cultivators were all trusted aides of the young master of Colossal Bone City, and none of them had escaped. Their families had left Colossal Bone City a few days ago to seek refuge in other buildings. Under the crowd's curses, these people were lined up in a row and knelt on the ground. The young master of Colossal Bone City was still struggling on his deathbed. His hair was disheveled and his face was covered in dust as he shouted at Tai Sing, "You can't kill me. I'm the young master of Colossal Bone City, and my father is the great elder of a 5th grade city. If you kill me, he'll definitely not let you off." Tai Sing was taken aback and said to the young master, "What did you say? Aren't you the son of the city lord of Colossal Bone City? How did you get a father who is an elder of a level 5 building? The city lord of Colossal Bone City is not my father. My father is the grand elder of Bloodsand City." This is absolutely true. When the crowd heard this, they immediately began to discuss with each other, their faces full of gossip. They did not expect to learn of a shocking secret at this moment. It would be a joke if the long-dead city lord of Colossal Bone City did not know about this. No, if he knew the truth, it would be even more of a joke. The cunning and sinister city lord of Colossal Bone City was actually a green hat city lord who had been a father for many years. Tai Sing wasn't in the mood to investigate the weird love history of the city lord of Giant Bone City. A mere grand elder of a level 5 city tower was also unable to threaten him. The confidence that the Holy Dragon City had given him allowed him to be fearless of any threats from any force. Tai Sing looked coldly at the kneeling young master of Colossal Bone City who was still talking non-stop and said, "Kill. Don't, Ying Luo." Pfft. A group of Holy Dragon City warriors drew their blades at the same time and hacked the back of the head of the young master of Colossal Bone City and the others. Blood immediately spurted out. The young master of Colossal Bone City fell to the ground. After twitching a few times, he became completely silent. Since the young master of Colossal Bone City was dead and all the residents had surrendered, the following matters were much simpler. After taking stock of the goods and the number of people, Tai Sing informed the Holy Dragon City and requested for a convoy to assist in transporting the goods. The next morning, the convoy from Holy Dragon City arrived. After Tai Sing gave a few instructions, he once again stepped onto the chariot and headed for Redwater City and Earth Valley City. The rest of the journey did not go smoothly. When Tai Sing arrived at Redwater City, what he saw was the city that had become an isolated island in the middle of a lake. Redwater City was named so because it was surrounded by Redwater Lake on 3 sides and only had one passage. It was a natural defense. However, it was also because of this reason that the terrain near Redwater City was relatively low. Now that there was a flood, Redwater City was immediately in big trouble. Standing by the river and looking through the telescope, one could see that the river had already spread to the 3rd floor of Redwater City. A water monster in the shape of a dragon was lying on the roof of the building, lazily basking in the sun. Judging from the current situation, I'm afraid there are no more residents in Redwater City. I just don't know if they're dead or alive. Tai Sing jumped onto the military vehicle and smacked his lips. It's a pity that those treasures in Redwater City are not fated with us. As he spoke, Tai Sing took out a map and pointed his finger at the map before shaking his head. It seems that those rats in Earth Valley City will not be able to escape this time. We might have made a wasted trip. I don't care anymore, I need to take a look before I can be at ease. Order the convoy to set off. The chariot slowly moved again, and then, with a cloud of dust in its wake, it headed straight for Earth Valley City. Earth Valley City was located in a rocky area full of strange peaks. There was a huge cave in the mountains, and Colossal Bone City was built in it. According to Tai Sing's current understanding, Redwater City and Earth Valley City should be located in an ancient river that had dried up for countless years, surrounded by low-lying terrain. If not for the flood, these places would have been perfect for building a city. All west ch.rs on n.o/vli/n/.cm. But who would have thought that a flood would fall from the sky? Tai Sing looked at the old river outlined on the map and then at the river outside, his brows furrowed slightly. Could it be that there's some special connection between the ancient river and the flood? On his way to Earth Valley City, he encountered some wanderers, and Tai Sing ordered his men to capture them. After a little inquiry, these wanderers spilled everything they knew. Originally, these wanderers were the original residents of Earth Valley City. Now, Earth Valley City, which had been built in an underground karst cave, had been completely submerged, and only a small number of residents had fortunately escaped. When Tai Sing heard this, he revealed an expression that said "I knew it." After ordering a few survivors of Earth Valley City to lead the way and gather the scattered survivors, the convoy continued to move toward the location of Earth Valley City. Just as the survivors had said, the sky above Earth Valley City had turned into a vast ocean. Now, only a few black mountains were exposed above the water, and they were constantly washed away by the rapid waves. Redwater City and Earth Valley City had completely disappeared from the Tower World. After Tang Jin heard Tai Sang's story, he praised him and slowly opened the envelope in his hand. This was something that Hundred Flower Valley's City Lord had left for him. He didn't know what was written inside. After opening the envelope, a stack of letter paper was pulled out by Tang Jin. A metal plate with a strange texture was taken out and fell on the table. This metal plate was extremely hard, but it was very light. There were two sharp characters carved on it. Zhan Tian. The words looked familiar, similar to the ancient language of the League, but the strokes were slightly different. Perhaps there was some unknown connection between Heaven Battling City and the original world? Recalling the words of the Hundred Flower Valley City Lord, Tang Jin could faintly guess the use of this metal plate. With a soft laugh, Tang Jin placed the metal plate to the side and began to read the contents of the letter. All he could see were beautiful words, clear and beautiful with a trace of strength. As expected, the words were like the person. Please forgive my little sister for leaving without saying goodbye. Perhaps this is something you have already expected. I was born in Heaven Battling City, thousands of kilometers away, and the reason I came here was to complete the task my teacher gave me. Every resident of Heaven Battling City has the responsibility to give everything for the prosperity of the human race. Since I was born, everyone around me has told me this. Unconsciously, fighting for the prosperity of the human race has become my lifelong belief. It was with this belief that I went through countless hardships to come to this land and build the Tower City of Hundred Flower Valley. I originally thought that through my efforts, I could end the chaotic state of this region and let the humans here live a happy life. However, the real environment made it very difficult for me. I spent a lot of time and energy, but the city of Hundred Flower Valley only advanced to level 2, let alone control this area. My little sister had also been deeply depressed. The heroic words she said when she left home were still in my ears, but reality made me understand the hardships of the world. Fortunately, I met City Lord Tang Jin when I was in the most desperate situation. Although our ideals don't match, I can still see that you have great ambitions and are sparing no effort for the development of the human race. Compared to your achievements, what I've done is simply insignificant. My teacher once said that people of different paths cannot make plans together, but I don't think so. As long as the humankind could rise up under the pressure of the other alien races, so what if they were not on the same side? This time, my little sister returned to Heaven Battling City to report her experience to my teacher, and then tell him my thoughts. No matter what the outcome is, I will still support your actions. The mountain is high and the road is long, I'm afraid we won't meet again in this life. This little sister is thousands of miles away, I wish you to suppress the 100 races and become an overlord soon. Lastly, I've attached a Heaven Battling City token and a map of my Heaven Battling City as my little sister's apology for not saying goodbye. I hope you take care, we will meet again. Tang Jin placed the letter in his hand on the table. After pondering for a while, he unfolded a map drawn with monster leather. Tang Jin merely took a glance before his brows furrowed. Tang Jin saw an incomparably vast world on this map. The main body of the map was an incomplete outline of the continent, and the places marked with words only took up 1/3 of the space. The other blank areas were marked with the word unknown and a short description. The Holy Dragon City was located near an unknown area. About 500 kilometers away was a cluster of buildings built by the kobolds. Further away were the territories of the non-humankind, and the humankind only occupied a small area. Compared to the area under the control of those non-humankind beings, this small area of the humankind was not even worth mentioning. At the other end of the map, Tang Jin saw the Heaven Battling City that the Hundred Flower Valley City Lord had mentioned. The area it controlled was very large. However, around Heaven Battling City, there were several towers of foreign races that were not inferior in scale, forming an encirclement. It seems that woman's words are true. This heaven-battling city is surrounded by powerful enemies, and the situation is not optimistic. Being able to hold on until now, it seems that he does have some ability. Tang Jin carefully looked around again and was surprised to find an area called the Starfall Sea near Heaven Battling City. The Starfall Sea isn't too far from Heaven Battling City. It should be the place where Arel and the others live. Tang Jin finally understood the origin of the Falling Star Sea. Some of the doubts in his heart were also resolved. However, some new doubts also emerged. The Devil Fall Sea was tens of thousands of miles away, and the demon-eyed Tyrannosaurus definitely wasn't doing this out of boredom. It definitely had a purpose that he didn't know about. What caused Tang Jin to be the most shocked was a foreign tribe that occupied a large piece of land far away from the central region of the continent. A line of small words described the information of this area, and the content of the description was shocking. The area controlled by the Abyss Fiend race has a national-level building. The building is an underground city, specific information unknown. What made Tang Jin shocked was this national-level building. After the tower was upgraded from level 5 to level 6, it could be called a Lord Tier Tower. After breaking through to level 10, it could be called a National-level Tower. Although it seemed like a simple classification, the meaning it represented was not simple. Every time Liu Qing advanced a level, it would consume countless resources and energy. Tang Jin had a deep understanding of this. The Abyss Fiend race had actually built a nation-level city, so one could imagine how powerful they were. Fortunately, the Abyss Prison demons were tens of thousands of miles away and did not pose a threat to the Holy Dragon City. When the day came that both sides had no choice but to come into contact, the Holy Dragon City would not be any weaker than the other party. Tang Jin was very confident about this. This map was very timely for Tang Jin. It allowed him to have a clearer understanding of the surrounding situation and also had a preliminary understanding of this continent. After keeping the map and the Heaven Battling City token, Tang Jin looked at Tyson and said, "You said that the path of the flood was actually a river that existed a long time ago. Is your information accurate?" "That's right." Tyson nodded and said in a clear voice, "According to the captives from Redwater City and Earth Valley City, they found the bones of huge fish and monsters many times around the tower, as well as broken shells. Explore new ovals on nvelbai.com. Their ancestors had also mentioned the legend of this river. It was said that it had suddenly appeared 1,000 years ago and then disappeared without anyone knowing. In addition, this area is a continuous low-lying terrain, so I believe that there was a large river here a long time ago." Tang Jin nodded. His face had a pensive expression as he said, "If that's the case, things will be interesting. This river suddenly appeared many years ago, and then disappeared naturally not long after. Is it related to the demon-eyed Tyrannosaurus? What's its purpose for going through so much trouble to drive a large number of water monsters here?" Tang Jin stood up and walked to the window. After taking 2 steps, he said to Tyson, "I've decided to walk along the river you mentioned tomorrow and see where it leads to. Maybe the answer we want is at the end of this river." The military helicopter flew over the river, and wanderers could be seen moving around the river from time to time. While the sudden flood destroyed countless lives, it also brought a new source of food for the wanderers. They formed groups and wandered around the river, trying to catch fish and shrimp in the water. Their harvest was quite good. During this period, some unlucky guys were swallowed by the water monsters, but it still couldn't stop the wanderers' enthusiasm for fishing. When the wanderers saw the armed helicopter, they subconsciously started to hide, treating it as a flying monster. From the terrified expressions on their faces, it could be seen that flying monsters were almost the top predators in the wilderness. They were also one of the monsters that the wanderers were most afraid of. Tangjin did not have the intention to tease these wanderers. After briefly checking the ruins of Redwater City and Earth Valley City, Tangjin continued to head towards the end of the river. The further away they were from the Holy Dragon City, the more monsters there were in the river. Tangjin even saw a Lord Tier monster. When the water monsters passed by the Holy Dragon City during the day, they would definitely be killed. Therefore, Tangjin concluded that they should have swum across the river in front of the Holy Dragon City at night. It might be the nature of these water monsters to hide in the day and come out at night, or they might be under some kind of control. No matter what the reason was, Tangjin could confirm that these water monsters' destination was the end of the river downstream of Holy Dragon City. After making this discovery, Tangjin was even more eager to find out where the end of the river was. After flying for about an hour and passing by several buildings, a huge sinkhole suddenly appeared in Tangjin's vision. In this desolate area, there were planes everywhere, making this sinkhole look extremely out of place. The area of the sinkhole was extremely large. In Tangjin's map, he could not see the end. At the edge of the sinkhole, there was an extremely deep and huge ravine. The surging river water filled it and flowed into the sinkhole. With the influx of a massive amount of water, the sinkhole would gradually be filled up, and the Hydra would be able to run wild in it. After Tangjin maneuvered the assault helicopter around, he found a concave area and slowly landed on the ground. He then kept the helicopter into his storage space. At this moment, Tangjin was dressed neatly. A pistol and a saber hung from his waist. He was wearing a slightly old leather jacket and looked like a wanderer in the wilderness. After looking around, Tangjin began to walk toward the sinkhole. When he was circling in the air earlier, Tangjin had discovered the traces of many cultivators. They seemed to be searching for something in the sinkhole. Perhaps he could get more information from these people. Tangjin quickly passed through the weeds and soon arrived at the edge of the sinkhole. He also encountered a group of human cultivators. After seeing Tangjin walk out from the wild grass, these people began to size him up with vigilant eyes. "Brother, are you also here to look for treasures in Tiankeng?" A burly man with a full beard walked out from the group of cultivators and greeted Tangjin. The burly man's cultivation was at level 3, so he should be the leader of the exploration team. The cultivation of his team members was uneven, and there was even a level 1 teenager. From their messy equipment, it could be seen that these people were all wild cultivators and belonged to the same exploration team. Tangjin nodded, but his line of sight bypassed these cultivators and looked at another exploration team not far away. It was an expedition team made up of foreign cultivators. They looked no different from humans, but there were different kinds of strange runes between their eyebrows. The most obvious difference was that at the back of their necks, tentacle-like tentacles were constantly dancing, as if they were detecting something in the air. A lady wearing a mask in the exploration team coldly snorted when she saw that Tangjin was somewhat indifferent to her group. Clearly, she was a little angry. The captain of the exploration team could not see Tangjin's cultivation level clearly. Seeing that he had a fearless look, he wisely did not say anything. After smilingly warning Tangjin to be careful, he led his team members towards the sky cavern. Tangjin shook his head gently when he saw the human race's exploration team leave. He then walked toward the foreign race's exploration team. This foreign tribe exploration team was talking about something. When they saw Tangjin approaching, 2 foreign tribe cultivators immediately walked out and scolded Tangjin, "Lowly human beings, stay away from this place." They treated Tangjin as an ordinary human cultivator who was weak but wanted to seek refuge with the alien race. Therefore, their words were not polite at all. F0 Low New Hapters at nov/el/bin/.com. Tangjin's footsteps didn't stop at all. He raised his palm and fiercely slapped. A foreign race cultivator flew out and heavily fell to the ground. Seeing that their companions had been attacked, the foreign cultivators were shocked. They drew their weapons and pounced toward Tangjin. It was a pity that they did not have any chance of winning against Tangjin, who had the cultivation of a lord. In the blink of an eye, all the members of this foreign tribe exploration team were defeated by Tangjin. Due to Tangjin holding back, their lives were not in danger. It was just that they were unable to enter the sinkhole to continue exploring. Tangjin slowly walked to the captain with the highest cultivation among the foreign cultivators. He then took out a military knife and placed it on the captain's neck. "Tell me all the secrets of this sinkhole, or I'll not only kill you, but also your entire team," Tangjin said word by word in the language of the foreign race. When the foreign cultivator heard this, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He didn't expect that Tangjin would attack them just for this matter. If this foreign race cultivator knew the true reason behind Tangjin's actions, he would probably be even more speechless. The truth was that Tangjin didn't like this group of foreign people. That was why he attacked them and also asked about the secret of the sky pit. He definitely wouldn't get an answer if he asked directly, so he called first. The foreign cultivator knew that he wasn't Tangjin's match, so he simply told him everything he knew. It turned out that in the central area of the sinkhole, there was an extremely hard and strange stone. 1,000 years ago, someone had discovered its peculiarity. It could make a rice grain-sized magical crystal grow in the body of animals and plants. After this kind of crystal grew in the body of animals and plants, they would have the ability to become invisible and their senses would become extremely sharp. Even cultivators would not be able to discover their traces. However, this invisibility would lose its effect after leaving the sinkhole, so these mutated animals and plants would never leave the sinkhole. After conducting experiments, a learned alien scholar discovered that the crystal could assist a holy master in their cultivation. At the same time, it could effectively improve a cultivator's perception and the strength of their physical body. The alien scholars called them soul crystals and were willing to buy them at a high price. For a time, the price of these crystals, which were called soul crystals, skyrocketed, attracting countless cultivators to come and collect them. However, the harvest was very little. Unless one was extremely lucky, no one would be able to find those invisible animals and plants. However, an accident 1,000 years ago allowed the cultivators to obtain a large number of soul crystals. And that unforeseen event was because of the sudden flood that fell from the sky. This secret from 1,000 years ago allowed Tangjin to finally understand the Demonite Tyrannosaurus plan. The reason why the Demonite Tyrannosaurus used its innate ability to smash the sky and drive a large number of Hydra here was probably because of these soul crystals. As for why it chose to do this 1,000 years later and not any other time, it was likely to be related to some strange disaster in the Lucheng world. According to the information that Tangjin had obtained from various books, a strange cold moon would appear in the sky of the Tower World every 1,000 years or so. This cold moon would stay in the sky for a year. During this period, it would block the sun, causing half of the continent to fall into darkness. The temperature of the wilderness would drop drastically, and snow would cover the entire wilderness. The monsters would also become more brutal and strange. According to Lucheng's historical records, when the cold moon covered the land, all strange objects would form a blue ice armor that would emit a faint fluorescent light at night. This kind of monster with ice armor had extremely high defense, and its strength was multiplied. After killing a monster, one would be able to obtain a type of mutated brain pearl. Its value was 10 times that of a normal brain pearl. Along with this cold moon, there was a strange race called Ice Imps. It was said that these Ice Imps were a foreign race that lived on the cold moon. When the cold moon appeared, they would descend into the world of Lucheng through special means. The Ice Imps would kill any living being other than monsters and then transport the corpses to the cold moon. In all the ancient books, the event of the cold moon's descent was collectively referred to as the cold moon disaster. When Tangjin was reading books in the past, he didn't pay too much attention to this matter. At that time, he only took a glance and didn't study it in depth. Now, through the actions of the demon-eyed Tyrannosaurus, Tangjin suddenly recalled the various phenomena before the disaster of the cold moon. Among them, there were holes in the sky and the appearance of wild buildings. Perhaps as the cold moon approached, the space in the world of Luqing became extremely unstable, which was why these things happened. After calculating the time when the cold moon disaster would descend, Tangjin was somewhat shocked to discover that there was actually less than half a year left before the cold moon disaster this time. Tangjin frowned tightly when he thought of this. A sense of urgency rose spontaneously. During the disaster of the cold moon 1,000 years ago, all wanderers and cultivators who had the ability would try their best to escape from the shadows for fear of being killed by the ice imps and monsters. However, 1,000 years later, very few humans and non-humankind beings knew about this secret. Besides, the area covered by the cold moon was thousands of miles wide, so where could they escape to? Even if the city lords, big and small, knew about the disaster of the cold moon from the inheritance, they would still hold the mentality of being lucky. How many of them would be able to give up their own foundation and run for their lives? Tangjin did not care what others would do. Now that he knew that the disaster of the cold moon was coming, he had to make early preparations to avoid being caught off guard. Damn it, why are all these trashy things happening one after another? The natives of this world of Luqing are really like cockroaches. They've been tortured by the heavens and still haven't died. Tangjin cursed in his heart. He no longer paid any attention to those foreign race cultivators and began to walk toward the depths of the sinkhole. There were many thick ancient vines growing on the cliffs at the edge of the sinkhole. They were numerous and extended all the way to the bottom of the sinkhole. The deepest part of the sinkhole was already filled with turbulent waves. The endless river water was gradually filling up the place. As expected of a king-tier monster, the demon-eyed Tyrannosaurus had a good plan. When the sinkhole was completely filled with seawater, these Hydra could run wild in the sinkhole and capture the invisible soul crystal creatures to obtain a large number of soul crystals. This kind of soul crystal creature could only become invisible, but it could not become invisible. When it moved in the water, it would inevitably cause water ripples or waves. In its own territory, the Hydra could easily track down the soul crystal creatures and capture them. As for how to hand over the soul crystal to the demon-eyed Tyrannosaurus, it wasn't something that Tangjin knew for now. Tangjin swiftly descended along the vines. Not long after, he landed on a platform in the air. Looking down from here, he could see many cultivators hanging in the air with vines in their hands, staring at the water without blinking. Most of them were holding a strange kind of net in their hands. It was woven with vines and was connected to a long rope. Tangjin carefully looked at this tool and discovered that it was similar to a hidden weapon called the blood guillotine in the original world. Every time a wave suddenly appeared on the surface of the water, but there was nothing at first glance, the cultivator closest to it would throw the rattan net over and pull it back after hitting the target. After the net was pulled, it immediately closed tightly. It clearly looked empty, but it continued to struggle and shake. At this time, the cultivator would quickly withdraw the net cage and shake it violently in his hand. When the soul crystal creature in the cage was shaken unconscious, he could take it out. Only after the soul crystal creature was killed and its blood was drained could its true appearance be seen. It could be a mouse, a weed, or even an unremarkable worm. The originally ordinary creatures were no longer ordinary after they had the soul crystal. Perhaps after the soul crystal appeared in their bodies, their original souls had disappeared, and the soul crystal led their bodies to continue living. After killing these soul crystal creatures, the cultivators would find the soul crystals in their bodies and carefully put them into special containers. The process of capturing these soul crystal creatures was not smooth sailing. It was filled with danger and twists and turns at all times. These soul crystal creatures were extremely cunning and would not show themselves unless it was absolutely necessary, so they had to keep a close eye on the surface of the water at all times. While they were capturing the soul crystal creatures, the nearby cultivators also participated in the robbery, both openly and secretly. Under the vast surface of the water, there were a large number of water monsters shuttling back and forth. They were constantly looking for soul crystal creatures and ambushing the careless cultivators. In just a few minutes, when Tang Jin was observing the environment at the bottom of the sinkhole, several cultivators were dragged into the water by the water monsters. The outcome was obvious. The two Lord-tier water monsters emerged from the water from time to time and spat water balls at the cultivators on the vines. Once they were hit, they would immediately be crushed to pieces. However, the huge benefits that soul crystals represented made these cultivators risk their lives and seize every second to fish out the soul crystal creatures that appeared from time to time. Men die for wealth and birds die for food. It was the same in the world of Luqing. The human exploration team that Tang Jin had seen earlier was currently at the position he was standing on. However, there were only 6 of them left from the original 8. A wave of water suddenly appeared. The masked woman of the human exploration team was the closest, and she immediately threw the rattan net in her hand down. After the net fell to the water, it accurately caught the swimming soul crystal creature. The masked woman was overjoyed. She quickly pulled the net cage into her arms, afraid that the struggling soul crystal creature would escape. However, just as the masked woman grabbed the net cage, something strange happened. A level 4 water monster suddenly jumped out of the water, opened its mouth full of sharp teeth, and pounced on the masked woman. Originally, the masked woman was at a high position, so it was difficult for the Hydra to touch her body. However, this Hydra had a frog-like tongue. The tongue was like a bolt of lightning, striking straight at the masked woman's chest, making it impossible for the masked woman to dodge in midair. Little butterfly! The middle-aged man from the human expedition team roared in pain, but he could only watch helplessly as the masked woman was attacked. He was helpless. Just when the Hydra's tongue was so close to her that everyone thought the masked woman was dead for sure, a cold light suddenly flashed. Oh woo! The level 4 Hydra let out a scream as its long tongue was cut into 2 and fell into the water. The masked woman who had just escaped death immediately looked to the side, wanting to know who had saved her at the critical moment. Then, she saw the annoying man outside the sinkhole. He was holding an ancient vine and looking at her with a smile that was not a smile. Read lat stch on n/v/l/b.i.cm. Brother, thank you for saving me. The middle-aged man thanked Tang Jin with a face full of gratitude. If it wasn't for Tang Jin's timely intervention, his daughter would have died without a doubt. A word of thanks was simply not enough to express his gratitude. The middle-aged man made up his mind that he would show his gratitude after they left the sinkhole. Tang Jin did not care too much about the matter of saving people. He had merely done it in passing. Tang Jin ignored the masked woman who was staring at him. He grabbed the ancient vine with one hand and activated the all-round digital battle interface to scan his surroundings. Discover NW Chapter SNN0EL by.com. He wanted to try and see if these soul crystal creatures could escape the detection of the application. The results of the scan came out very quickly. They could indeed find traces of soul crystal creatures, but it could only be displayed when the soul crystal creatures were moving. When the soul crystal creatures remained still, Tang Jin's application was similarly unable to discover their hidden position. These soul crystal creatures are interesting. Should we try other methods? After he thought up to this point, Tang Jin activated the Spirit Body Seeker and tried to see if he could use this method to search for spirit bodies to search for soul crystal creatures. As the application was activated, Tang Jin's vision immediately changed. The entire world became bleak and desolate. However, in this strange and pale world, there were suddenly bright spots of light that flashed, making the world lively all of a sudden. Tang Jin's heart was filled with joy. He didn't expect that the spirit body seeker would really be effective. Those flickering light spots should be invisible soul crystal creatures. In order to verify his guess, Tang Jin quickly headed towards the light spot closest to him. That light spot was located near the masked woman. The masked woman panicked when she saw Tang Jin swiftly swing towards her and stop beside her. She opened her mouth and said, "What are you doing, Qian Qian?" The voice was crisp and clear, like the sound of a silver bell. Tang Jin ignored the masked woman. He merely extended his hand and grabbed at the back of the masked woman. An animal screech was suddenly heard near the originally empty vine. Tang Jin clenched his fist and slowly retracted it. Under the bewildered gaze of the masked woman, a dead soul crystal creature appeared in Tang Jin's hand. It was a small, emerald green snake. It was only a foot long and its body was as clear as jade. Tang Jin crushed the small snake's head and a resplendent soul crystal the size of a rice grain appeared in his hand. After sensing it for a moment, Tang Jin discovered that when he used his mental energy to come into contact with this soul crystal, it was like a hungry ghost that had encountered delicious food. It caused one to have an impatient desire to devour it. This was indeed a magical thing. It seemed that he had to get more of it. Putting aside the magical effects of the soul crystal, just its high price was enough to move Tang Jin. Even if you had a brain, you might not be able to buy it. How did you find it? The masked woman curiously looked at Tang Jin and asked. Her clear black and white eyes were filled with curiosity. Although she knew that Tang Jin would definitely not tell her the truth, she still could not resist the doubt in her heart and asked in a soft voice. "What do you think?" Tang Jin threw out a sentence that caused the masked woman to secretly clench her teeth. After which, her body was like lightning as she suddenly pounced toward a cluster of vines not far away. In his field of vision, there was a large group of flashing light spots behind the vines. Tang Jin only discovered that there was actually a hidden cave behind the vines after they got closer. Those soul crystal creatures were currently gathered at the entrance of the cave. Unless the water flooded the place, these soul crystal creatures would not easily leave their hiding place. However, their choice had allowed Tang Jin to avoid quite a bit of trouble. Tang Jin extended his hand to push aside the vines that were blocking his way and directly jumped to the entrance of the hole. At the same time, he continuously grabbed with both his hands. After crushing them, he directly stored them in his storage space. This series of actions was as smooth as floating clouds and flowing water. In just a short minute, Tang Jin had caught dozens of soul crystal creatures. After the masked woman by the side saw the scene, she was so shocked that she was unable to close her small mouth. She could only look at Tang Jin in a daze. She had followed her father to capture soul crystal creatures in the sinkhole ever since she could remember, so she was very familiar with soul crystal creatures. It was because of this that she knew the difficulty of capturing it. Sometimes, the search team would wander at the bottom of the sinkhole for half a month without any results. According to the experience passed down by their ancestors, they gathered at the bottom of the sinkhole on the day of the flood to capture the soul crystal creatures that were rarely seen. Even with the flood, it was still difficult to capture them, and they had to risk their lives. However, the man in front of him was able to lock onto the soul crystal creature with his naked eye. Moreover, he gained something every time he made a move. It was simply unbelievable. A dense curiosity rose in the heart of the masked woman. She could not help but move toward Tang Jin. After Tang Jin caught all the soul crystal creatures at the cave's entrance, he glanced at the cave's interior and a trace of joy appeared on his face. In his field of vision, the number of soul crystal creatures gathered in the cave far exceeded the number at the entrance. Just as he was about to drill into the cave to capture her, Tang Jin discovered that the masked woman had leaned over and was currently staring at him without blinking. "Do you need something?" Tang Jin coldly asked. His tone carried a trace of killing intent that was barely detectable. I'm just a little curious, so I'll hide far away and watch. I won't disturb you. The masked woman's eyes were a little evasive, and she seemed a little embarrassed. Whatever, but I have to remind you that curiosity kills. Tang Jin leaped and entered the interior of the cave, leaving behind the masked woman who was constantly looking around at the entrance of the cave. After Tang Jin entered the cave, he realized that it was not very deep. However, the number of soul crystal creatures that had gathered was actually in the thousands. Tang Jin was overjoyed and immediately began to capture them. Every time he attacked, he would be able to capture more than 2 soul crystal creatures. However, the soul crystal creatures were immediately frightened and began to run out of the cave desperately. F***CK. Tang Jin could not help but open his mouth and curse when he saw nearly 100 soul crystal creatures scuttle out from behind a huge rock that he did not notice and crazily rush to the entrance of the cave. Quickly help me block the hole, the tighter the better, I won't mistreat you. Helplessly, Tang Jin could only turn around and roar at the masked woman, asking her to help block the soul crystal creatures that were escaping. This masked woman's reaction was extremely quick. She had fiercely blocked the entrance of the cave the moment Tang Jin's voice sounded. He stretched out his hand and pulled it out from behind him. A flexible square-shaped frame that looked like an umbrella expanded. On the umbrella-like frame, there was a layer of something like a plastic film. After it was opened, it actually blocked the hole tightly. Tang Jin immediately gave a thumbs up and praised after seeing this scene. You're quite professional, not bad. Tang Jin's hands flickered again before he finished speaking. Another dozen or so soul crystal creatures were caught. The masked woman at the entrance of the cave was not idle either. The soul crystal creatures kept crashing into the barrier she had erected, exposing themselves at the same time. Every time this happened, the masked woman would throw out a net cage and catch him. In just a few minutes, it had already caught more than 20 soul crystal creatures. The masked woman's heart was beating wildly. In the past, such a huge harvest was simply an incredible thing. Even when the flood came these days, their search team had been at the bottom of the sinkhole to catch them, but they had only caught 7 soul crystal creatures. They had even lost 3 exploration team members. But now, he only needed to help block the door and he could get a large number of soul crystal creatures. The comparison was simply frustrating. They were all cultivators, but why was there such a huge gap between them? After a few minutes, Tang Jin finally finished capturing all the soul crystal creatures in the cave. Tang Jin estimated that they had caught a total of more than 1,100 soul crystal creatures in this cave. It could be considered a great harvest. Such a rich harvest made Tang Jin decide to go all out. Tang Jin patted off the dust on his hands and walked to the entrance of the cave. He sized up the somewhat perturbed masked woman. This Ying Luo is for you. The masked woman's eyes revealed her reluctance, but she still happily handed the captured soul crystal creature to Tang Jin. She could tell that Tang Jin's cultivation was very high and that he could easily crush her. Moreover, these soul crystal creatures did not belong to her. The masked woman did not have the qualifications to possess them. Tang Jin swept his eyes over those soul crystal creatures. He waved his hand, "This is your reward, keep it." The masked woman was stunned for a moment, then she quickly thanked him. She quickly took out all the soul crystals and put them into a container close to her body. Is that thing behind you made to capture soul crystal creatures? Tang Jin pointed at the large umbrella behind the masked woman as he softly asked. That's right. We usually open it when we search for soul crystal creatures at the bottom of the sinkhole to intercept and drive away soul crystal creatures. The masked woman explained to Tang Jin after she finished dealing with the last soul crystal creature. Tang Jin nodded. He took a step out of the cave and jumped onto an ancient vine. He began to search for similar places, which would double the efficiency of the capture. He quickly locked onto a location and waved at the masked woman. "There's another cave over there. Do you want to come with me? We'll follow the rules." The masked woman hurriedly nodded her head. After shouting at her father, she swung the ancient vine and chased after Tangjin. Tangjin's speed was extremely fast. Within a few minutes, he had already arrived at the location of his target. However, just as he got close, he felt a gust of wind. He reached out and found a dark black stone dart in front of him. It was a type of rock that was similar to obsidian. It felt very heavy in the hand, and the edge of the blade was extremely sharp. If one were to be hit in the throat or face by this kind of hidden weapon, they would definitely suffer serious injuries. Tangjin frowned. He actually dared to launch a sneak attack on him without distinguishing between right and wrong. He was really courting death. Just as Tangjin caught the tongue-hidden weapon, a group of dark-skinned foreign people on the vines not far away from him sneered and cursed at Tangjin. "Damned human, are you tired of living? How dare you approach the Firestone race's territory? Get lost, or I'll kill you. Just kill him, you lowly bastard." The group of cultivators from the Firestone race laughed and cursed, not putting Tangjin in their eyes at all. In fact, Tangjin had already noticed this point. In the distribution of the capture areas under the sinkhole, the human race occupied the smallest area and was also the most dangerous. In the areas occupied by these foreign races, they didn't even need to rely on the ancient vines to stabilize their bodies. They only needed to stand on the protruding stone walls. It was easy to tell who was stronger between the human race and the alien race. At this moment, the masked woman had also caught up. When she saw that Tangjin was having a conflict with these Firestone clansmen, she tried to pull Tangjin away so that he would not suffer a loss. What the masked woman didn't expect was that Tangjin actually took a step forward and pointed at the Firestone race cultivators. "This area is mine now. I'll give you 1 minute to leave, or don't blame me for being impolite." Tangjin spoke in the Firestone race's language and had deliberately raised his voice, so every Firestone could hear him clearly. The cultivators of the Firestone race suddenly burst into laughter as they pointed at Tangjin and scolded him. Read latest chapters at no.vel bin/.c/o/m only. Damn it, what did I just hear? A joke? This human is crazy. He actually dared to provoke the Fire Sway clan. Don't you think this is very interesting? I remember that there was a human who did this last time. What happened after that? Of course, we tied them up with ropes and threw them into the bee's hive. Ha 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 ha. I can still remember the horrible state of that human before he died. Why don't we play again today? All right, it's decided then. As the group of Firestone race cultivators laughed and cursed, they decided on a method to kill this human before them. However, when they turned their heads to look at Tangjin, they discovered that he was still softly muttering something. Buy-in in 3, 2, 1, time's up. Tangjin raised his head and looked at the Firestone race cultivators. He revealed a cruel smile. "Since that's the case, you can all go die." Tangjin waved his hand and a machine gun appeared in his hand. He pointed it at the cultivators and pulled the trigger. Pa pa pa. A series of gunshots rang out, and before the few Firestone race cultivators could react, they were already bloodied from the bullets. They screamed and fell from the vines. As soon as the body fell into the water, it was bitten in half by the water monsters, and the water was dyed red. Damn it, it's a flintlock. Run. Our leather armors can't block this kind of rapid-fire gun. Human, just you wait. I'm going to kill you all. As the 6 Firestone race cultivators were beaten to the bottom of the sinkhole, the remaining Firestone race cultivators were scared out of their wits and began to flee the area. I said I would take your lives, who can escape? Tang Jin coldly snorted. His body gently swayed and he jumped onto the protruding rock at the edge of the sinkhole. Tang Jin raised the machine gun in his hand. He didn't need to aim carefully as he fired at the cultivators who were climbing up the ancient vines one by one. In less than a minute, all the Firestone race cultivators were killed by Tang Jin. Seeing the cultivators of the Firestone race falling into the water and being devoured by the water monsters, the cultivators of the other races who were not far away were all shocked and quietly left the area. It had been many years since they had seen such a crazy human cultivator. Was he not afraid of the Firestone race's revenge? It was better to stay away from him so that he wouldn't be hurt by that terrifying flintlock. Otherwise, he wouldn't even be able to find a place to cry. The masked woman's eyes were filled with shock and joy when she saw Tang Jin use a machine gun to kill all the cultivators from the Firestone race. However, there was also a deep worry in her eyes. You have to be careful. The Firestone race has a camp not far away from the sinkhole. It is said that they all came from the same tower. When these Firestone race people find out about this, they will definitely take revenge on you. The masked woman held onto the ancient vine as she reminded Tang Jin. Tang Jin disdainfully laughed when he heard this. He said to the masked woman, "Don't worry, even if they don't come to me, I'll come to them. They treat us humans like ants and discuss how to torture and kill me in front of me. They are seeking death." After Tang Jin finished speaking, he glanced at the foreign cultivators who were constantly peeking at him. The killing intent in his eyes became more and more intense. This is a good opportunity to let them know the power of our Holy Dragon City. When a caravan heads to the Holy Dragon City in the future, they will be intimidated by the Holy Dragon City's military strength and will not dare to have any evil thoughts. Next, we'll sweep the bottom of this sinkhole. Anyone who dares to stop us will be shot to death. After Tang Jin made up his mind, he ordered the masked woman to continue blocking the entrance of the cave. He then entered the cave and continued to capture soul crystal creatures. After the capture was complete, Tang Jin continued to kill his way to the next position under the gazes of countless cultivators. At the bottom of the sinkhole, there was a commotion. When they saw Tang Jin rushing in their direction, a few foreign cultivators immediately drew their weapons and pointed them at Tang Jin. "Don't come over. This is the territory of our yellow armor race. If you don't want to start a war, leave immediately." A non-human cultivator with 4 arms and 2 pieces of yellow bone armor on his face shouted. It was just that his voice sounded like he was putting up a strong front. Tang Jin's figure paused for a moment. He used the language of the yellow armored race and said, "I'm just passing by. If you want to fight, I don't mind accompanying you." After speaking, Tang Jin raised his machine gun and aimed it at the yellow armor race cultivators, causing them to immediately panic. "Put away your weapons and let him pass." One of the level 4 yellow-armored race cultivators shouted at his team members with a gloomy expression. When the furious yellow-armored race cultivator heard this, he unwillingly withdrew his weapon. At the same time, he stared at Tang Jin without blinking. Tang Jin also kept his machine gun when he saw this. He spoke to the captain of the yellow armor race in a clear voice, "I'm the city lord of the Holy Dragon City, Tang Jin. Thank you, friends from the yellow-armored race, for letting me through." Tang Jin's body was like lightning after he reported his name. He quickly passed through the Yellow Armor clan's territory. Holy Dragon City Lord? Why does that sound so familiar? The yellow-armored race's cultivator frowned slightly. He fell into deep thought as he looked at Tang Jin's back. The eyes of the masked woman following behind Tang Jin brightened after hearing these words. She quickly gave chase. After passing through the yellow-armored tribe's area, there was a large protruding rock cliff, forming a suspended plank road. A group of muscular foreign people in light armor had occupied this place by relying on their military strength. After seeing Tang Jin approach, a foreign tribe member immediately blocked Tang Jin's path. He pointed at him and roared, "Lowly human, this is not the place for you to act so atrociously. Get lost now, or I'll kill you immediately." While this foreign cultivator was speaking, his companions behind him had already raised their weapons and aimed at Tang Jin. In the eyes of the foreign cultivators, the yellow-armored race's retreat was weakness and humiliation. The blood barbarian race was not that cowardly. No matter what, he could not let this human get past the blood barbarian's territory. Tang Jin's face turned cold as he looked at the blood barbarian who was filled with killing intent. He crossed a short distance in an instant and punched the blood barbarian who was blocking his way. Bang! Before the blood barbarian could react, Tang Jin had already smashed his head into pieces. All the blood barbarian cultivators were furious when they saw the headless body fall into the sinkhole. They all rushed forward. "Damn it, kill him! Chop him into pieces and let the humans eat him." Before the furious blood barbarian cultivators could get close to Tang Jin, they saw a strong light coming at them, blinding their eyes instantly. Despicable! Damn it, this is a divine spell. Be careful of Ying Luo. A blood barbarian cultivator's head was cut off by Tang Jin's alloy sword before he could finish his sentence. The headless body fell to the ground with a loud bang. Then, Tang Jin was seen shuttling back and forth among the blood barbarian cultivators like a phantom. An alloy sword was being wielded by him like a rapidly spinning windmill. Anyone who was touched by the sword light would immediately be sent flying. When the screams finally stopped, not a single blood barbarian cultivator was left standing on the path at the bottom of the sinkhole. There were only broken limbs on the ground. The blood kept flowing down the cliff, forming a line and falling into the water. Many water monsters were attracted by the blood of the cultivators. They rolled down below, revealing their ferocious backs from time to time. Tang Jin stepped on the head of the blood barbarian captain and snorted. "Do you still want to kill me now? Do you still want me to get lost?" The blood barbarian who was 2.5 meters tall struggled with all his might, but he could not move his body at all. He could only glare at Tang Jin and roar, "You're crazy. The blood barbarian race will never let you go. You'll be hunted down to death. If you want to kill me, then come. I'll kill as many as you send." Tang Jin's eyes were filled with killing intent. He lowered his head and looked at the blood barbarian. "Did you think that I would give in and not dare to pass through your side?" The blood barbarian snorted but did not say anything. "If you don't speak, then go to hell." Tang Jin's face turned cold as he kicked the blood barbarian off the cliff. "Ah, Ying Luo!" The blood barbarian screamed and fell into the water. He didn't even have a chance to struggle before he was torn into pieces by the Hydra. After seeing this scene, the foreign cultivators who were trying to block Tang Jin's path gave up on the idea in their hearts. Although he didn't want to be bullied by a human cultivator, the fate of the Fire Sway race and the blood barbarian race was clear. If he didn't want to die, then he shouldn't mess with this madman. Tang Jin had killed 2 groups of foreign cultivators in a clean and direct manner, causing them to be extremely terrified. In the next 2 areas controlled by the foreign tribe, they obediently opened up a path before Tang Jin could approach them. They were afraid that Tang Jin would suddenly kill again. When Tang Jin once again walked in front of a group of handsome foreign race cultivators, he directly stopped. The appearance of this group of cultivators was extremely similar to the Holy Dragon City's Yuemong who had turned into a woman. They were probably of the same race. When they saw Tang Jin suddenly stop in his tracks, the foreign race cultivators immediately became nervous and pulled out their weapons. They had witnessed the battle between Tang Jin and the blood barbarians. They were certain that Tang Jin's cultivation was above level 5. At the same time, he had demonic equipment with the skills of a holy master. There was no need to provoke such a powerhouse, even if he was just a human. Originally, they had planned to let Tangjin pass by and they would definitely not stop him. However, who would have expected that Tangjin would actually stop moving forward? Damn it, is he going to attack us? These foreign cultivators were nervous, and their hands that were holding their weapons were trembling. Explore new levels on nvelbai.com. At this moment, Tangjin was like a fierce tiger that had barged into a sheep pen, causing all the surrounding foreign race cultivators to tremble in fear. You guys are half-elves? Tangjin looked at the foreign cultivator with the highest cultivation and asked in a cold voice. The green-armored alien cultivator nodded and said to Tangjin, "We are indeed half-elves." Human, what's the meaning of your sudden stop? You don't need to be too nervous. I'm only going to enter the cave behind you. I'll be out soon. Tangjin smiled when he heard this. Hearing this, the half-elf captain stepped aside and waved his hand. In that case, please do as you please. Tangjin firmly nodded. He waved his hand at the masked woman behind him and headed straight for the cave that was covered by the ancient vines. After these half-elf cultivators saw Tangjin's actions, they were somewhat baffled. Could it be that he was planning to enter the cave and capture the soul crystal creatures? There were thousands of such caves at the bottom of the sinkhole. People would often go in to check if there were soul crystal creatures, but they found nothing. As time passed, no one bothered to go into the cave to look for soul crystal creatures anymore. However, looking at the confident expression on this human cultivator's face, could there be some secret hidden in these caves? After thinking about this, the half-elves were eager to try. It was a pity that they didn't know that they didn't have a technique as powerful as the Spirit Body Seeker, so they couldn't confirm where the soul crystal creatures were in the thousands of caves. Moreover, these soul crystal creatures were extremely cunning and had extremely sharp senses. They could sense any means that could detect their location at the first moment and escape quickly. It was only because of the magical application of the Spirit Body Seeker that he could detect the location of the soul crystal creatures without them knowing. Under the half-elf cultivator's gaze, Tangjin slowly walked to a row of caves and stood firm. He reached out to one of the holes, and the two soul crystal creatures that had been crushed to death appeared in front of everyone. After seeing this, the half-elf cultivator's eyes lit up. Tangjin didn't care about the shocked expressions of the half-elf cultivators behind him. He quickly waved his hands and grabbed one soul crystal creature after another, crushing them to death before storing them in his storage space. As he watched Tangjin's smooth and natural movements, the half-elf captain was madly envious, but at the same time, he was also secretly shocked. From the methods Tangjin had displayed, he already had a preliminary analysis and understanding of Tangjin. His cultivation was very high, at least level 5, and could even be a terrifying Lord-level expert. Otherwise, he would not dare to be so unscrupulous at the bottom of the sinkhole. It had at least 2 types of expensive divine magic weapon equipment, one of which was a spatial magic weapon that was extremely precious. Normal MO weapons and equipment were already expensive, and Shin Art MO weapons and equipment were even more expensive. As for spatial magic equipment, it was simply a legendary artifact. Other than hearing that a few powerful foreign races had it, the half-elf captain had never heard of anyone or any force that had it. This kind of spatial MO weapon was something that could easily cause a massacre. How could one protect it without powerful strength? Looking at Tangjin's method of capturing the soul crystal creatures, there was an 80% chance that he had a spatial-type demonic weapon. To be able to possess such a legendary divine weapon and still dare to openly display it, either one's strength was terrifying, or the power behind them was astonishing. He just didn't know if this human cultivator had astonishing strength or both. The half-elf captain's eyes flickered, and his mind kept on pondering. One thing for sure was that they couldn't offend this human cultivator. Otherwise, they and their team members wouldn't be able to walk out of the sinkhole alive. Seeing Tangjin's high efficiency in capturing the soul crystal creatures, the half-elf captain's heart burned with passion when he thought of his mission this time. Whether or not they could complete the mission and obtain the noble title that their ancestors had yearned for would depend on this operation. After thinking up to this point, the half-elf captain immediately ordered his team members to turn their backs to Tangjin and put on a vigilant posture, as if to ensure that Tangjin would not be disturbed when he was capturing the soul crystal creatures. After seeing this scene, Tangjin looked at the half-elf captain and smiled, but he didn't say anything. The half-elf captain was obviously asking for something from him by doing such a fawning action. Let's see what he wants. If he intends to take advantage of me, then he's absolutely delusional. After capturing the soul crystal creatures at the entrance of the cave, Tangjin ordered the masked woman to block the entrance of the cave while he continued to capture them. Even from a long distance away, the half-elf captain could hear the screams of the soul crystal creatures coming from the cave. This also proved that Tangjin had a good harvest in the cave. The half-elf captain's heart beat faster, and his face turned slightly red. Elves and half-elves would only show such expressions when they were extremely excited. After seeing the captain's expression, the half-elf cultivators were secretly surprised. They wondered what was wrong with the captain. Why was he so excited for no reason? After around 10 minutes, Tangjin walked out of the cave with a satisfied expression on his face. The half-elf captain immediately walked in front of Tangjin. Under everyone's gaze, he deeply bowed. Tangjin looked at the half-elf captain and softly said, "You can speak now. What do you want?" The half-elf captain immediately said, "Dear Mr. Cultivator, I would like to buy your soul crystal. Please state your price." Tangjin secretly laughed in his heart. So this was what this fellow was planning. It's not that I can't sell it, but first tell me the price you can give me? Tangjin pondered for a moment and said to the half-elf captain. The half-elf captain was overjoyed and immediately replied, "According to the current price, one soul crystal is 900 brain pearls. I can give you 1,000 brain pearls for one soul crystal and buy 1,000 soul crystals." Tangjin was also slightly stunned in his heart after hearing the price given by the half-elf captain. He only knew that the price of a soul crystal was very high, but he did not expect it to be this high. The price offered by the half-elf captain was already equivalent to 1,000 level 4 brain beads. In other words, he was prepared to use 1,000,000 brain beads to buy 1,000 soul crystals. Tangjin was quite interested in this business. However, Tangjin was still a little dissatisfied with just selling it to the other party. After all, soul crystals were things that had a price but no supply. It was excusable no matter how high the price was. Tangjin turned his head to look at the masked woman. After seeing her nod her head slightly, he had an idea in his heart. This price is acceptable, but I have a condition. Hearing this, the half-elf captain's heart beat wildly, and he quickly asked, "Tell me, what are your conditions?" "I want to get a portion of moon spring water from the elves." "Do you have it?" The mother tree had been thinking about the moon spring water for a long time. If Tangjin wanted to pacify this proud guy, he had to use the moon spring water. When the half-elf captain heard this, he immediately had a difficult expression as he said to Tangjin, "The moon spring is located in the forbidden area of the royal elven clan. It's hard for us ordinary elves to even take a look at it, let alone get a portion of it." After speaking up to this point, the half-elf captain looked at Tangjin with a pleading expression, "Can you change your condition? I'll try my best to satisfy you." Tangjin was a little disappointed when he heard this. He shook his head and said, "I only want a portion of moon spring water. Since you can't do it, then let's not talk about it anymore. Upto.dfrm no/v/e/lb/i/n.co/m." After saying this, Tangjin turned around and left. Hearing this, the half-elf captain was anxious. Whether or not he could get 1,000 soul crystals was a matter of family honor and interests. How could he miss such a great opportunity? Damn it, what should I do? The half-elf captain was about to go crazy. He couldn't beat him, and he didn't have the moon spring water. Was he going to miss this rare opportunity? The anxious half-elf captain suddenly had a flash of inspiration in his mind. This made him overjoyed. He stopped Tangjin and said, "Don't worry, I know a piece of information that might be worth a portion of moon spring water." Tangjin, who was about to leave, immediately stopped and looked at the half-elf captain. "If the information you provide is valuable, I can make a deal with you." Hearing this, the half-elf captain didn't dare to hesitate and immediately told him what he knew. It turned out that a few decades ago, a team of elves had left the capital city and headed to the area near the Holy Dragon City in search of a tower city that once existed as a branch of the elves. The residents of the city tower belonged to a race that was rarely seen among the elves. They were called the Tree Spirits. The Tree Spirit tribe had always been prosperous, but they suddenly lost contact with the elves 1,000 years ago. There was no news from them in the following years. But one thing was for sure, most of the Tree Spirit tribe members were dead, and the tower was completely destroyed. In the past 1,000 years, there had been people who had tried to cross the wilderness to find the ruins of the Tree Spirit tribe's building, but they had all failed because they encountered powerful monsters. Decades ago, the elders of the elf tribe once again proposed to find the ruins of the Tree Spirit tribe, find the foundations of the towers that might still be there, and then build a new tower on the original site. In this way, the elf tribe could live and reproduce, control this area, and monitor the dog-headed people at the same time. In order to ensure that the building foundation could be used, the elders of the elf clan even took out a portion of the moonlight pebbles from the moon spring and gave it to the leader of the cultivator team who was carrying out the mission. These moonlight pebbles were formed from the essence of the moon spring. They could form a drop of moon spring water at midnight every day and were one of the treasures of the elf race. However, the weather was unpredictable. When the team of cultivators made up of hundreds of people was about to reach the ruins of the Tree Spirit clan's building, they encountered a large group of Cyclops and were completely annihilated. The moonlight pebble had also fallen into the area controlled by the Cyclops, and no one had dared to retrieve it. After the half-elf captain said this, he looked at Tangjin and said, "Look at this message. Are you satisfied?" Tangjin muttered to himself for a moment. Under the half-elf captain's anxious gaze, he gently nodded. After the deal was settled, Tangjin no longer wasted time with the half-elf captain. With a wave of his hand, the ground was filled with the corpses of soul crystal creatures. After seeing this scene, everyone's eyes almost popped out. They were shocked by the large number of soul crystal creatures in front of them and were also shocked by the performance of the items that Tangjin released with a wave of his hand. At this moment, Tangjin had become incomparably lofty and mysterious in their eyes. "Go check it out, but be quick," Tangjin urged the half-elf captain with a hint of impatience in his tone. Seeing that night was about to fall, Tangjin still planned to search for a few more caves. He didn't want to waste too much time with the half-elf captain. The half-elf captain checked it for a moment before he walked to Tangjin with a smile and handed an exquisite leather bag to Tangjin. "Here are 100 level 5 brain beads, please keep them well." After Tangjin received the leather bag, he briefly glanced at it. After confirming that the amount was correct, he directly turned around and left. After Tangjin left, the half-elf captain immediately looked around vigilantly. At the same time, he ordered his team members to pick the soul crystals. After all the soul crystals had been picked, they quickly left the sinkhole and went straight into the depths of the wilderness. In the following time, Tangjin searched 2 more caves and captured a large number of soul crystal creatures. Due to Tangjin's lightning-quick attack earlier, it had caused these foreign tribe members to be intimidated. Hence, no one dared to obstruct his actions. Even though he had become greedy when he saw Tangjin capturing the soul crystal creature, he did not dare to make a move at the bottom of the sinkhole. That was because he would definitely die. As for what they would do after leaving Tianqing, no one could say clearly. By the time night fell, even the masked woman who followed behind Tangjin had already obtained over 100 soul crystals. There was no need to mention Tangjin's harvest. The two of them walked along a passage that led to the top. It didn't take long for them to walk out of the sinkhole. An anxious-looking middle-aged man was waiting outside the sky pit. He clearly heaved a sigh of relief when he saw Tangjin and the masked woman walking up. He swiftly walked in front of the two of them and bowed to Tangjin. "Just now, Xiao Dai has been troubling Sir Cultivator. Please don't blame her." The middle-aged man had seen everything that happened at the bottom of the sinkhole earlier. Therefore, he did not dare to show any disrespect to Tangjin. Tangjin laughed when he heard this. "Your words are wrong. It's clearly your daughter who has been helping me. How did it become her who's troubling me?" The middle-aged man's face was filled with fear when he heard this, and he said, "Sir Cultivator, you're right." Tangjin did not continue to talk to the middle-aged man when he saw his uncomfortable appearance. Instead, he turned his head and looked at the masked woman. "You're called Xiao Dai, right? I advise you to leave this place immediately to ensure your safety. After all, when we were in the sinkhole, you were always following behind me. They didn't dare to touch me, but that doesn't mean that they didn't dare to capture you. So you should leave as soon as possible." When Xiao Dai heard this, she shook her head and said to Tangjin, "It's precisely because of this that I can't leave you, or else I'll really be dead." After saying this, Little Butterfly's beautiful eyes looked at Tangjin and used a pleading tone, "Once we leave your side, we won't be able to escape the pursuit of those foreign cultivators. Only by staying by your side can we guarantee our absolute safety. I know that you are the Holy Dragon City's city lord, so I'd like to ask if you can let us join the Holy Dragon City." Slowly taking out the container containing the soul crystal, Xiao Dai directly handed it to Tangjin and softly said, "These are all the soul crystals I've obtained with your help. There are 125 in total. Please accept them." The eyes of the human cultivators, including the middle-aged man, lit up when they heard the number of soul crystals. More than 100 soul crystals meant a considerable amount of wealth. They did not expect that Xiao Dai would be able to obtain such a number of brain beads just by following behind Tangjin. Then, wouldn't Tangjin's harvest be shocking? Explore Ta-Ti stories at no/l/bin.cm. However, Xiao Dai's words also made them understand their situation. As expected, after leaving Tangjin, only death awaited them. Now, their life and death were completely in Tangjin's hands. It all depended on whether Tangjin would agree to let them join the Holy Dragon City. As for what kind of place Holy Dragon City was, they were still unclear. Tangjin smiled and glanced at Little Butterfly. However, he did not take the container. "What you said is not unreasonable. In that case, you can follow me. When we return to Holy Dragon City, I don't mind giving you the qualifications of a reserve resident." Xiao Dai and the others were overjoyed when they heard this. They didn't expect that Tangjin would really agree to their request and allow them to become residents of Lu City. Compared to the joy of obtaining more than 100 soul crystals, becoming a resident of the city was the real joy. That middle-aged man immediately walked over and said to Tangjin, "It's getting late, why don't you return to the camp with us first?" Tangjin nodded. He indeed wanted to continue gathering tomorrow. Finding a place to rest was a necessary thing. Following that, the middle-aged man led the way. After walking through the grass for a while, they arrived at a hidden camp that looked like a scenting place. Seeing that Tangjin was constantly looking at the camp, Xiao Dai quickly explained, "There's a cave down there. It's very spacious and has been used for hundreds of years. We usually live here, and the cave is very clean. Tangjin nodded and followed Xiao Dai and the others down. The underground space was indeed as Xiao Dai had said, it was very clean and the area was very large. From the marks on the rock wall, it could be seen that this place had a long history. How many cultivators who caught soul crystal creatures had lived here before? The middle-aged cultivator lit an oil lamp made of monster oil and led Tangjin to a separate cave. There was some dry grass on the ground and an oil lamp. It looked clean and there was no smell. Tangjin took out some canned beef for Xiao Dai to use as dinner. Then, he took out all the soul crystal creatures he had obtained and asked the others to help him pick the soul crystals. When they saw the soul crystal creatures that almost covered the ground, their faces were filled with awe. They immediately squatted down and began to pick. These cultivators' profession was to capture soul crystal creatures. They were agile, so they were able to pick them up very quickly. By the time Xiao Dai finished cooking dinner, they had basically finished the work of picking the soul crystals. Tangjin put away the soul crystals that he had picked up and collected all the corpses of the soul crystal creatures on the ground. During this period, Tangjin had been using the map view to observe the reactions of the few people. Fortunately, no one revealed a dangerous expression. Otherwise, Tangjin wouldn't mind sending them on their way. After a simple dinner, everyone returned to their caves to rest after a busy day. Tangjin returned to the cave he lived in. He held a soul crystal in his hand and began to absorb the energy in the soul crystal according to the method Xiao Dai had taught him. Following Tangjin's spiritual sense, the energy contained in the soul crystal immediately turned into invisible smoke and continuously fused into Tangjin's spiritual energy. It was a very comfortable feeling, like a thirsty plant being nourished by the clouds and immediately becoming alive. After about 10 minutes, Tangjin had completely absorbed the rice grain-sized soul crystal. His entire person also became refreshed. Just as he was planning to absorb another soul crystal, Tangjin noticed that someone was approaching the cave he was in. Looking at the map, it was the woman named Xiao Dai. She gently walked to the cave where Tangjin was. When she saw Tangjin staring at her, she lowered her head slightly and took off the long robe that was draped over her. Her creamy skin was displayed before Tangjin's eyes. There was not a single flaw, appearing exceptionally perfect. After that, Xiao Dai took off her mask, revealing a very charming face, making people unable to look away. No wonder she was wearing a mask. This would save her a lot of trouble. You actually don't have to do this. I will definitely fulfill my promise. Xiao Dai, I think it's necessary, because there are some opportunities that can't be grasped, and I'm afraid I will regret it for the rest of my life. My intuition has always been accurate. If that's the case, then come over. Ingluo, yes. The next morning, everyone got up early and began to prepare for the day's work. In the past, when they went to Tianqing, they were all nervous, afraid that they would never return. The battle at the bottom of the sinkhole was actually very brutal. Cultivators would often fight, and from time to time, abandoned corpses could be seen. When the flood poured into the sinkhole, the battle entered the stage of white heat. If it was not for Xiao Dai's exploration team being careful, they would have been killed several times. Get the L-test VLS at .o/v/e/l/by.co. However, now that Tangjin was in the team, their courage had also increased. A trace of a smile would occasionally appear on their faces. In the world of Lucheng, it was definitely a very happy thing to be protected by a strong person. Tangjin was an absolute expert in the eyes of Xiao Dai and the others. Breakfast was still the canned beef that Tangjin had taken out. After they had a full meal, they walked out of the underground cave and began to advance towards the sinkhole. After walking for a distance and almost reaching the sky pit, Tangjin suddenly turned his head and looked at Xiao Dai and the others. You guys wait here for a moment. When I call you over, you can go over, understand? When Xiao Dai and the others heard this, they immediately thought of something and shook their heads in unison. We'd better go with you. Although our cultivation isn't high, we can at least help. There's no need for that. Just wait. Tangjin's voice had just sounded when his entire body was like lightning as he headed straight for the sky pit. After Xiao Dai and the others looked at each other, her father shook his head and said, "We should listen to Lord Tangjin's arrangement and wait here." That's right. Lord Tangjin's cultivation is extremely high and he has magical means. Isn't it extremely easy to deal with a bunch of ignorant fellows? Our cultivation is still too low. Lord Tangjin is afraid that he will have to take care of us after we go over. Xiao Dai did not speak. She just quietly listened to the sounds of fighting in the distance, and her brows furrowed. Everyone placed their hopes on this man, hoping that nothing would happen to him. Xiao Dai's actions were only to find someone to rely on for herself and her father. He didn't need to live in luxury, as long as he didn't lack 3 meals, and he didn't need to risk his life every day for a meal. Since Tangjin was the city lord of a tower city, he would definitely be able to give his woman the simple life she wanted with his ability. The sounds of fighting only lasted for a few minutes before it completely subsided. A moment later, Tangjin's voice was transmitted over, "Come out, we'll continue." Xiao Dai's heart skipped a beat when she heard the voice. An inexplicable joy crept up her brows and she was the first to rush out. With just a glance, Xiao Dai saw the man. He stood in the middle of a pile of Fire Sui clansmen's corpses and was sneering at the foreign cultivators in the distance. At this time, the sun had just risen, and the warm sunlight outlined the man's back, as if he could block all the wind and frost in the world, leaving only warmth for himself. An emotion called security filled Xiao Dai's heart in an instant, making her feel relaxed. Behind Xiao Dai, a few human cultivators looked at the corpse of the Firestone on the ground in shock. In just a few minutes, Tangjin had killed more than 30 Firestone race cultivators who came to seek revenge. His strength was simply terrifying. Looking at the panicked foreign cultivators in the distance, one could guess how big of a shock Tangjin had brought to them. "If there's any equipment that you like, pick it up. I'll be waiting for you." Tangjin left behind these words before walking towards the edge of the sinkhole. Everyone quickly lowered their heads and began to search, the smile on their faces growing wider. Each of them had gained quite a lot, and their pockets were full. After all, this was the inheritance of more than 30 foreign cultivators. After cleaning up, everyone hurriedly walked to Tangjin's back and waited for his arrangements. "We'll occupy that spot today. Xiao Dai and I will continue to capture soul crystal creatures. You guys wait there and make sure you're not hurt by the water monster." Tangjin pointed at the place that the half-elves had occupied yesterday and instructed the few people behind him. Everyone quickly nodded. They naturally had no objections to being able to obtain such a good location. At the same time, they also sighed in their hearts. If it wasn't for Tangjin being here, how could they occupy such a good position? They would have been driven out by the foreign cultivators long ago. With Tangjin's deterrence, even if the foreign race cultivators were given a few more guts, they would not dare to act rashly. Following the ancient vines and the passage, they slowly reached their designated positions and began to get busy. Tangjin looked at the water level that had increased by a large amount, as well as the increasing number of water monsters in the water. A thoughtful expression flashed across his face. He began to think about how he could intercept all of them when they returned to the hole in the sky after the sinkhole was full. In this way, he could get countless soul crystals, a large number of Hydra corpses, and brains, and also cause trouble for the demonite Tyrannosaurus. It was killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Tangjin would definitely not let go of such a good opportunity. In addition, there was also the mysterious boulder at the bottom of the sinkhole. Tangjin estimated that it should be a meteorite with a very magical ability. Tangjin wanted to bring it back to Holy Dragon City to see if he could mass-produce soul crystals. If he really couldn't do it, he would upgrade the map and then use the terrain transformation plugin to move the entire sinkhole. If he wanted to level up the map again, he would have to use up a lot of brain cells. However, compared to the rewards, he had earned a lot. Tangjin now habitually wanted to move back to Holy Dragon City after seeing good things. Was this a good thing or a bad thing? He activated the Spirit Body Seeker and started to scan the nearby area. A moment later, he waved at Xiao Dai and the two of them immediately ran into the distance. With yesterday's fame and this morning's massacre, Tangjin had become an existence that no one dared to provoke at the bottom of the sinkhole. Wherever he passed, the foreign cultivators had to make way for him, regardless of whether they were willing or not. Some of the foreign cultivators had obviously found out about his identity, and they even took the initiative to come forward and talk to him. Some human cultivators were especially respectful in front of Tangjin. In addition to being intimidated by Tangjin's cultivation base, the more important reason was that Tangjin had earned face for the human cultivators. This made these foreign tribes no longer dare to look down on the human cultivators. Even if they were afraid of Tangjin, these human cultivators also felt honored. During this period, there was also a peak rank 5 alien cultivator who provoked Tangjin. In the end, he was killed by Tangjin in one move and his body was directly thrown into the sinkhole to be fed to the water monsters. Tangjin also didn't let off any of the members of the exploration team he led. They were all thrown into the water and swallowed alive by the corpse monster. After this scene, no other foreign cultivators dared to jump out and pick a fight. Even before Tangjin arrived, they had already retreated to the side and waited for Tangjin to pass by with smiles on their faces. The name of the Holy Dragon City's city lord, Tangjin, was known by all the cultivators in the sinkhole at this moment. Then, it slowly spread in the wilderness. By the time the sun was about to set, Tangjin had already completed the search of the entire Tianqing. He brought Xiao Dai and the others to the surface. Under the horrified gazes of countless cultivators, Tangjin boarded the military helicopter that appeared out of thin air. Under the afterglow of the setting sun, he pulled Xiao Dai and the others and flew straight to the Holy Dragon City. Tangjin got up from the soft bed and washed up. He then went to the city lord's hall and began to arrange today's work. Because the disaster of the cold moon was coming, Tangjin had to be cautious and start to raise a large number of winter supplies. For the creatures in the wilderness, the cold moon disaster was a complete disaster. This was also the reason why there were almost no buildings over 1,000 years old in the nearby areas. There were not many buildings that could last until the end of the year when the disaster of the cold moon descended. The area covered by the cold moon disaster was basically desolate, mainly because of this once-in-a-millennium disaster. However, wasn't this also an opportunity for Tangjin to make a fortune? As long as he could defend the tower, Tangjin could upgrade and build his city in peace. He could also take the opportunity to recruit some wanderers who were chased by the ice imps and had nowhere to go. To be able to survive in such an environment, they must be some powerful guys. They would become the Holy Dragon City's military reserves for future expansion. The ice-armored monsters all over the place could also provide Tangjin with a large number of brain beads. Most importantly, the value of a mutated brain pearl was 10 times that of a normal one. It was worth the risk to get 10 times the benefits. Danger and opportunity coexisted, but the premise was that one had to be fully prepared. In addition, Tangjin also had to make preparations to intercept the Hydra. He would not let a large amount of wealth slip away in front of his eyes. To deal with these water monsters that were going against the current, it was necessary to modify some professional hunting tools. Tangjin had already informed people about this matter, and someone was doing it now. After thinking about it, Tangjin realized that the most important thing at the moment was actually to go to the Wei Island to collect the debt. Last time, he had swept away all the experimental equipment of SST and left behind the trading location and supplies. If the other party still wanted these experimental equipment, they would have to provide ransom according to his requirements. How could he just give up billions of experimental instruments and scientific research materials? SST would definitely carry out the transaction, but Tang Jin didn't believe that this group of guys would obediently follow his requirements. Perhaps that place had already set up an inescapable net and was just waiting for him to enter. However, since Tang Jin dared to do this, he wasn't afraid of being ambushed by the SST. After tidying up his storage space and changing into a set of clean clothes, Tang Jin started the teleportation. This was a park on the Wei Island. It was a holiday, so there were many people playing in the park, and the atmosphere was joyful. Tang Jin was wearing a black trench coat and a pair of sunglasses. His figure was tall and straight, and his entire body emitted an aura that made people feel oppressed. It felt like a man-eating tiger was staring at him, and his hair and fine hair stood on end. After advancing to the Lord rank, Tang Jin's appearance and aura had undergone a huge change. He was becoming more and more perfect. This was a kind of evolution, an evolution from a low-level life form to a high-level life form. After some of the timid fellows walked to Tang Jin's side, they all subconsciously hid at the side, afraid that they would anger him. On the contrary, there were quite a number of youthful and romantic girls who were staring at Tang Jin without turning their eyes away as they walked behind him. A few of the bolder ones actually walked over and asked to take a photo with Tang Jin. Tang Jin was a little irritated. After coldly rejecting a few people, he quickly left the park. He walked to the side of the road and cracked a car's anti-theft system, then started it and drove away. The location he gave last time was a deserted island near the Wei Island. Due to the dangerous terrain, no one lived there. Tang Jin had chosen this place because he wanted to find a suitable battlefield for himself. The field of vision here was wide and there were not many obstructions. This allowed Tang Jin to clearly and conveniently monitor the entire battlefield to avoid any blind spots that he could not observe. Whether it was in the sky, on the ground, or in the sea, Tang Jin had the confidence to make the other party come and never return. After the car drove to the seaside, Tang Jin made a round before driving off a yacht at the dock and heading straight for the vast sea. When they were about to arrive at their destination, Tang Jin put on the underwater breathing worm and put the yacht into his storage space before he fell into the sea. The water that was filled with resistance was not a problem for the current Tang Jin. He rapidly advanced on the seabed like an underwater ghost as he rapidly approached the deserted island. When they were close to the beach, Tang Jin activated the quantum stealth light curtain and slowly landed on the deserted island. He activated his application to scan the entire island and found hundreds of surveillance cameras in hidden locations. He used the electromagnetic pulse bomb to destroy all the electronic equipment and continued to move forward. Through the map view, Tang Jin saw that a large number of containers were stacked at the center of the deserted island. It was likely that they were the materials that he had requested. Nearly 100 strong men in black combat suits were holding weapons, surrounding the supplies, fully focused on guarding. Tang Jin did not care about these ordinary people at all. He would be able to get rid of them without spending much time. Of course, this was only the guards on the surface. No one knew how many enemies there were in the dark. He activated the infrasonic wave generator and an invisible demon began to appear, pouncing toward the guards. It didn't take long for the guards to go crazy, and the whole place was in chaos. Screams filled the entire deserted island, and people fell to the ground one after another, struggling a few times before no longer moving. LA test NOVLS on n/co. A few minutes later, Tang Jin turned off the infrasonic wave generator and slowly walked toward the center of the deserted island. Tang Jin arrived in front of the shipping containers. He casually opened one of the containers and casually checked it. There were indeed things in the container that he wanted. At this point, the SST did not play any tricks. This didn't mean that the people from SST were sincere in making a deal with Tangjin, but in order to ensure that they would take the bait, they had spent a little more effort on the bait. They didn't know if Tangjin would monitor the transportation of these materials. If Tangjin found out that the SST was up to something from the start, there was no need to continue this transaction. After checking all the containers, Tangjin activated the holographic camouflage light screen and covered all the containers. From now on, even if Tangjin moved the containers away, no one would be able to see anything unusual from the outside. 1, 2, 3 Kasayas. After about half an hour, Tangjin had moved all these containers back to Holy Dragon City. After turning off the holographic camouflage screen, Tangjin looked around and a mocking smile appeared on his face. Hurry up and come out. You've been watching for half an hour. Aren't you tired? Tangjin's voice continued to reverberate on the deserted island. However, no one appeared from the beginning until the end. There was only the sound of the waves that continued to be transmitted into his ears. You're not coming out? Then I'll go first. Remember to thank those guys at SST for me. As for these materials, just take it as compensation for the interruption from the SST last time. If you want the experimental equipment, it will depend on my mood. Tangjin slowly walked toward the shore after saying this. He had a pleased and content expression. During the entire process of Tangjin walking to the beach, there was still no one who appeared. It was as if he was the only one left on this deserted island. However, just as Tangjin was passing by a stretch of huge rocks, a cold light suddenly appeared and headed straight for Tangjin's back. After enduring for so long, he has finally appeared. Tangjin fiercely pulled out a demon weapon and ruthlessly slashed at the cold light. Swish! A burst of flames flashed. The weapon used by the other party actually blocked Tangjin's demon weapon and was not directly cut in two. The weapon is not bad. Now this is interesting. Although the attacker's weapon was not broken, the force of the demon saber sent the attacker flying and crashing into a rock. A trace of bewilderment flashed across Tangjin's eyes as he looked at the dying ambusher. He sized up the other party's equipment without blinking. This person was wearing a strange black combat suit that completely covered his body, even his eyes were covered. With just a glance, Tangjin was certain that the cost of making this combat suit was extremely high. It was clearly a high-tech product. What surprised Tangjin was that the sneak attacker's overall quality was extremely high. His strength and speed were actually equivalent to a rank 2 cultivator. In the original world, it was Tangjin's first time coming into contact with a human with such a physical fitness. This involuntarily caused him to feel extremely curious. According to the scan of the all-round digital combat interface, the vital signs of the ambusher had completely disappeared, which meant that he was completely dead. Tangjin picked up the ambusher's weapon and discovered that it was made of an unknown material. After it took a blow from the demon soldier's saber, it only left a crack on the blade. If this kind of weapon could be mass-produced, could it replace magic weapons and become the Holy Dragon City's standard equipment? Just as Tangjin was quietly pondering about the material of this weapon, two cold glints once again attacked and headed straight for Tangjin's vital points. Tangjin slightly lowered his body and dodged the sneak attack from behind. At the same time, two sharp military knives appeared in his hands and he directly threw them out. Pfft! The two military knives carried great force as they pierced through the tough combat suit and stabbed into the chests of the two ambushers. Find PT Tez on n/VLN.cm. The ambusher's body stiffened. After twisting a few times, he fell limply to the ground. It was another two men in the same combat suit. There were also traces of electric light flashing at the place where the military saber was inserted in their chest. Their combat suits were also visible from time to time, and sometimes their appearance would be exactly the same as the scenery on the ground. This combat suit can actually achieve invisibility. Interesting! Compared to the quantum invisibility screen used by Tangjin, the invisibility effect of this combat suit was extremely poor when moving. However, when it was still, it could very effectively integrate into the surrounding environment. If they did not move, it would be very difficult for Tangjin to discover their existence. Tangjin casually put away the bodies of the two ambushers. At the same time, he held the weapons they used in his hands. It was a weapon that looked like a traditional Japanese saber, but it was more than 3 times heavier than an ordinary Japanese saber. The strength of these two ambushers was close to that of a rank 2 cultivator. From their weapons and equipment, they should belong to the same group. Tangjin did not expect that in his original world, there would actually be a human with such abnormal physical abilities. He had even formed an organization. However, there was one thing that Tangjin was sure of. This kind of human was extremely rare. There were probably only a few of them in the entire spa. Compared to ordinary people, level 2 cultivators were already very powerful. He wondered if this was the limit of their physical strength. Bang! A dazzling flash appeared, followed by countless crossbow arrows coming from all directions towards Tangjin. Their speed was not inferior to bullets. This crossbow bolt had been specially modified to have a high-voltage electric shock and a strong anesthetic effect that lasted for 2 minutes. If an ordinary person was hit, they would definitely be captured. Tangjin roared loudly. A divine art protective barrier appeared around his body and blocked all the crossbow arrows. The protective barrier was removed. Tangjin casually waved his hand and more than half of the crossbow arrows landed in his hand. He then threw them out. A few screams were heard at the same time. Those guys who sneaked an attack on Tangjin were all locked on by Tangjin. Each of them had at least 5 crossbow arrows stuck in their bodies. The high-voltage electric current and powerful anesthetic took effect at the same time, and with the piercing damage of the crossbow arrows, even though these sneak attackers were far stronger than ordinary people, they were killed instantly. Tangjin walked to the side of one of the ambushers' corpses and picked up a multi-barrel generator. Those crossbow arrows were fired using this thing. After storing the crossbow launcher in his storage space, Tangjin suddenly turned his head and looked at the beach behind him. Over 10 human figures that were continuously flickering appeared. They swiftly approached Tangjin and surrounded him. One of the ambushers, who was wearing a black combat suit and had a slim figure, walked in front of Tangjin and spoke in the Asian Alliance language. Mr. Tangjin's strength is indeed worthy of his reputation. He's actually safe and sound even under the repeated siege of the Celestial God troops. But that's the end of the show. Now that the deserted island has been locked on by missiles, as long as I give the order, it will be razed to the ground. I advise you to surrender as soon as possible and listen to our arrangements. Otherwise, you will die today. All of you really think too highly of yourselves. The so-called Celestial God troops are nothing but trash in my eyes. Tangjin laughed in disdain when he heard this. You want to threaten me with a missile? I'm surprised you came up with this idea. Tangjin's voice had just faded when his body suddenly flashed. His sharp Japanese sword had already attacked the 2 members of the Heavenly Gods unit. Before the 2 of them could react, Tangjin had already cut their bodies in half. Fresh blood instantly dyed the beach red. Tangjin's sudden attack caught the Heavenly Gods troops off guard. However, they instantly reacted and began to attack Tangjin. Guns, Wei Island guns, and even taser guns were all aimed at Tangjin. However, their strength was far inferior to Tangjin's. In less than 10 seconds, these people had all fallen on the beach. The cultivation of the woman who was talking to Tangjin was obviously higher than that of her companions. She had already reached the standard of a rank 3 cultivator. But even so, she was still not Tangjin's match and was knocked unconscious by a punch from Tangjin. Tangjin naturally had his own purpose in leaving this woman behind. After the woman was knocked unconscious, Tangjin saw a white shadow flash by from the map view. At the same time, a sense of crisis struck his heart. Missiles! This thought appeared in Tangjin's mind. He immediately grabbed the woman's combat suit and activated the instant teleportation map plugin. A few seconds after he disappeared, a missile bombarded the place where Tangjin was at earlier, blasting the deserted island into rubble. Tangjin's figure appeared out of thin air on the sea surface a few kilometers away. At the same time, a yacht appeared on the surface of the sea and firmly caught Tangjin, who was falling from the sky. After throwing the unconscious woman onto the deck, Tangjin drove the yacht and rapidly rushed towards the shore. Tangjin was currently sitting on a chair in a house near the outskirts of the city. He was studying the weapons and equipment used by the Celestial God troops. This house, which had not been occupied for a long time, became Tangjin's temporary residence. On the floor behind him, there was a tall woman in a black tights. The woman was young, with a delicate face and graceful curves. She was currently unconscious. She was the Celestial God unit member that Tangjin had brought back. After stripping her of her combat uniform, Tangjin had directly thrown her onto the ground. The combat suit she was wearing was currently placed on the table in front of Tangjin and was being studied from inside out. A soft moan was transmitted over. Tangjin turned his head around and looked at the lady. "Since you're awake, let's have a good talk." Tangjin looked at the woman who had stood up from the ground and spoke with a soft smile. After the woman from the Celestial God unit woke up, she didn't make a fuss. Instead, she stared at Tangjin in silence. From her constantly blinking eyes, it could be seen that this woman was analyzing her environment and at the same time, coming up with a way to escape. Tangjin's eyes contained a cold glint. His gaze swept over the graceful body that caused the man's mouth to dry up. He could sense a hidden violent strength from it. This beautiful woman could definitely unleash a terrifying power in an instant and twist off the head of a strong man. I advise you not to make any pointless struggles. Your strength is not even worth mentioning in front of me. Do you understand? Tangjin fiddled with an electric bolt as he warned the woman. That woman slowly relaxed her tensed body when she heard this. She said to Tangjin, "Mr. Tangjin, you should know where you are. This is our SST's home ground. You lack sufficient understanding of SST. No matter how capable you are, I believe you can't go against the power of a country. But we, MOT, can borrow the military power of the Wei Island at any time, so that you have nowhere to hide. So I advise you to surrender as soon as possible and cooperate with us obediently. This way, you can still receive the treatment of a VIP. Otherwise, you will only become a prisoner." The more this woman spoke, the stronger her aura became. It was as if Tangjin was in a weak position and was destined to be unable to escape their pursuit. She was obviously very superstitious about the power of the organization behind her and thought that her organization was omnipotent. However, her words caused Tangjin to sneer. "I don't know what Spa did to give you such a strong self-confidence to make you say such ridiculous words. I've killed all your men in the Kimchi Kingdom. I've moved all the experimental equipment and research materials from your well-guarded SST Underground Research Institute. I've also moved away all the supplies you left on the deserted island and killed all the members of the Celestial Deity Army other than you. I'm the winner in every battle. Do you know what this means?" After Tangjin said this, he looked at the woman and shouted, "Mikisaka, I'm asking you, do you know?" Hearing Jintang suddenly call out her name, Mikisaka was slightly stunned. Her body could not help but tremble. Her name was a secret, and she usually used code names. How did this man know? Misaka Miki immediately became flustered, and her self-confidence wavered. I don't know. Tangjin suddenly pounced on Miki Sahua and pushed her to the corner of the wall. A large hand grabbed her slender neck and pushed him to the corner. Jin Tang raised his other hand and spread it open in front of her as he looked at the struggling Miki Saka. A soybean-sized metal object appeared in Jin Tang's palm. It looked extremely ordinary, but when Saka Miki saw this item, a trace of panic flashed in her eyes. This is the locator I took out from your arm. Now that it's completely destroyed, your organization doesn't know your location at all. If you're still planning to wait for SST to save you, I'd advise you to give up. I've erased all the information that can determine your location. The only person who can save you now is yourself. Tangjin pulled Miki Sahua to the edge of the window. He pointed at the ships that were anchored by the sea in the distance and said to Miki Sahua, "Do you see those cargo ships by the sea? Pick one for me now." Misaka Miki didn't know what was going on, but under the pressure of Jin Tang's terrifying aura, she could only choose a cargo ship. The third ship from the left, the yellow one. Tangjin nodded. He pinched Miki Sahua's chin and softly said in her ear, "Now you and I will let you know how laughable your thoughts are." As he spoke, Tangjin secretly used a holy master skill that he had exchanged for earlier. Mental enslavement. You can add mental power attacks to your words, causing the weak-willed to completely collapse and lose confidence. At the same time, they will fear the spellcaster and yield to the spellcaster to varying degrees. This was a holy master skill that could control low-level cultivators. The greater the difference in power between the two, the more obvious the effect. After obtaining this skill, Tangjin had never had the chance to use it. Now, he finally had the chance to use it. As soon as Tangjin's voice fell, Miki Saka saw a flash of light. The freighter she had chosen in the distance instantly caught fire, and a violent explosion rang out at the same time. The cargo ship was severely damaged. If there were no accidents, this cargo ship could be considered completely useless. How is this in Luo possible? Misaka Miki was dumbfounded. She did not expect that a casual point of her finger would determine the existence of a cargo ship. However, Misaka Miki knew that the one who really destroyed the freighter was the demonic man beside her. The self-confidence in her heart instantly crumbled. Her mind was filled with the various things that Tangjin had done, and a sense of powerlessness quickly overwhelmed Miki Saka's heart. That's right, according to the power he had displayed, who could subdue him? What was wrong with her back then? Why was she so confident? It was as if she was possessed and thought that she would definitely be able to catch him. In the end, half of the members of the celestial troops had died because of him, and he had also fallen into his hands. His life and death were completely in this man's hands, and he had no ability to resist. He simply couldn't resist him. If he wanted to live, he had to listen to his orders without any resistance. After thinking about this, Miki Saka's body became weaker and weaker. In the end, she collapsed in the corner of the wall with a disheartened expression. The effect of mental enslavement was evident. Miki Saka had completely lost all thoughts of resisting. Tangjin coldly looked at this woman as a trace of disdain flashed across his eyes. He didn't expect that Miki Saka's mental power was so weak despite her strong physical strength. It seemed like the method they used to increase their strength had an extremely obvious flaw. The physical body was strong, but the soul was not much different from that of an ordinary person. Once it was attacked in the mental aspect, it would immediately collapse. If he had known this earlier, he would have used mental intimidation directly. Why would he waste a chance to use the death ray weapon in order to enhance the persuasion effect? Looking at the dazed Miki Saka, Tangjin knew that she had completely lost the courage to fight him. "Miki Saka, come over here." Tang Jin looked at the woman who had limply collapsed at the corner of the wall and coldly snorted. After hearing Tang Jin's voice, Mikisaka's delicate body trembled slightly. However, she stood up without any hesitation and walked over to Tang Jin with her long legs. "Massage my legs, be gentler." When Mikisaka heard this, she immediately squatted down, placed Tang Jin's legs on her own, and gently hammered them. The black tights outlined Mikisaka's body in an extremely alluring manner. While she was beating her legs, there was a constant vibration of waves that rhythmically touched Jintang's legs. The double stimulation of sight and touch caused Tang Jin to unconsciously have a normal man's reaction. This scene was also noticed by Misaka Miki. The pair of small hands that were hammering his legs slowly moved upwards. When they reached the end, the hammering also became a caress. Tang Jin's eyes were fixed on Mikisaka. The other party gave a charming smile and gently lowered her head to tease her. In a slightly dilapidated house, Tang Jin was sitting on a chair. Behind him was an obedient-looking Mikisaka. Both of her hands were placed on Tang Jin's shoulders as she gently massaged him. "You're saying that the headquarters of the Celestial God Unit is on the top floor of the building, and the Weapons and Equipment Research Institute you use is also there?" In Tang Jin's field of vision, the 3D structure of a tall building was constantly changing. All the details of the interior were also accurately displayed. "Indeed." Mikisaka nodded and said, "After the 30th floor, the security of the building will gradually increase, and ordinary people will not be allowed to approach. If you want to enter the top floor of the Celestial Army's headquarters, you have to either take a special elevator controlled by the top floor or take a helicopter. There are no other ways to enter. We usually take a special helicopter to leave when we carry out missions. We rarely use that elevator." And NBSP, Tang Jin nodded and asked, "If you return to Spa now, you will definitely arouse their suspicion. So, it's best for you to go directly to Kimchi Country and find the person I'm talking about." Misaka Miki hesitated for a moment before she nodded. The truth was as Tang Jin had said. After this operation failed, other than having to bear the punishment for the failure, as the only survivor on the deserted island, it was absolutely inevitable for her to be suspected and investigated. Mikisaka shuddered at the thought of the interrogation methods of the celestial troops. After witnessing Tang Jin's magical means, Mikisaka, who had always thought that she had reached the limit of human strength, suddenly realized that she was not that strong. The man in front of her was the real powerhouse. The power of the mortal world could not conquer him at all, but he had easily conquered himself from the heart to the body. Mikisaka felt extremely honored to be able to serve such a powerful person. After making arrangements for Mikisaka, Tang Jin left the house and headed to the skyscraper where the Celestial God Troops headquarters was located. He had kept Mikisaka around in the beginning to find the headquarters of the Celestial Troops and obtain detailed information on the production of combat suits and weapons. Although the all-purpose electronic kit was omnipotent on the internet, it was also helpless when it came to information that wasn't available on the internet. Thus, only by asking the members of the Celestial God Unit would they be able to obtain the exact location of the Celestial God Unit's headquarters. This was a very important matter for Tang Jin. If the materials for the Japanese swords could be mass-produced, Tang Jin would no longer have to worry about the materials for forging MO weapons. After changing his appearance through the application, Tang Jin took a civilian vehicle and headed to the skyscraper of the Celestial Deity Army's headquarters in the second-largest city on the Wei Island. 4 hours later, Tang Jin got out of the car and began to stroll on the streets. As the weather turned cold, the clothes of the pedestrians on the street were much thicker, but there were still many women with their legs exposed walking by in a hurry. The building he was going to sneak into was located in a bustling street. There were too many people during the day, so Tang Jin decided to take action at night. The thing that Tang Jin needed to do now was to stroll the streets and communicate with his subordinates. New N0vel chapters are published on N0V/E/LB/IN/co/M. Tangjin had been paying close attention to the events in the original world, and the current development was considered smooth. With the help of Ivanov and the others, Su Feng had already gained a foothold in the Asian alliance. On the surface, he was now the boss of a company. His younger sister worked in his company and was under extremely strict protection. Ivanov was currently in a coastal city of the Ice Bear Alliance. He was also doing well, and the power he controlled was growing. The Kimchi country was also progressing smoothly, and it would not take long for a new generation of virtual reality games to be launched on the market. Now, the news often reported about this, which made the people of Kimchi country proud again. Tangjin only felt that their attitude was funny. The fundamental reason for the emergence of this virtual game technology was that Tangjin needed a large number of users to release soul signals to detect the location of the tower world. If the Kimchi country did not allow this technology to be promoted to the outside world and could only monopolize it, Tangjin did not mind to strengthen the extraction of soul power to make up for the lack of quantity. However, if that was the case, all the players from the Pickle Nation who participated in the virtual game would have to face the terrible consequences of their soul power weakening. They arrived at a small restaurant. Tangjin ordered some food and then took out his phone to browse the information on the internet. Tangjin had already used this kind of traditional way of surfing the internet less and less. If it wasn't because staring straight ahead would cause a misunderstanding, Tangjin would definitely not use his phone to surf the internet. Fortunately, after being modified by the Universal Electronic Tool, Tangjin could look at any information he wanted to see through his phone. As he was reading, a message caught Tangjin's attention. It turned out that the United States was going to hold an international weapons exhibition in a month's time. Many new weapons and equipment would be on display. Although Tangjin currently had quite a number of weapons, they were basically all firearm-type infantry weapons. These weapons could be used in ordinary battles, but in the face of the upcoming disaster of the Cold Moon, they were somewhat lacking in strength. Tangjin was currently in urgent need of some powerful city defense weapons. Perhaps he would be able to find a weapon that satisfied him in this international weapons exhibition. Tangjin didn't mind spending money as long as it was a good weapon that could be used. If one were to use gold to measure wealth, Tangjin's wealth could practically be described as a mountain. If he had his eyes on any weapon, he could just go back to the cave in the Holy Dragon Valley and get a few cards of gold. What couldn't he buy? After wandering around for a while, the sun gradually set in the west. Tangjin looked at the time and prepared to head to the building where the target was located. Tangjin had just taken a few steps when he suddenly heard the sound of a quarrel from a short distance away. He turned his head and saw a man pulling the woman beside him. The woman clutched the bag in her hands with all her might, while the man kept snatching it, cursing, and beating the woman at the same time. After seeing this scene, Tangjin strolled over and knocked the man to the ground with a punch. The woman, who had yet to recover from her shock, hurriedly hugged the leather bag in her arms. At the same time, she continuously thanked Tangjin. Sweeping his gaze at the man who had fallen to the ground and could not get up, Tangjin said to the woman, "If he's going to rob you, you can call the police now." That lady shook her head and said to Tangjin, "This is my ex-husband. He's a gambler. Not only did he refuse to raise our child, but he also shamelessly tried to steal my salary." After saying that, the woman couldn't help but cry softly. Tangjin sized up this woman and discovered that her appearance was very beautiful. However, there was a trace of worry that could not be dispelled between her brows. Since it was not a robbery, Tangjin was too lazy to care about this kind of thing. After telling the woman to go home quickly, Tangjin went straight to the building of the Celestial Deity Army, which was located in the bustling area. Well, truckers, that's all for this part. See you all in the next part.